I've got to apologise to you, Rebbie, for putting you through the utter trauma of not just Pixar but everything else we recommended.
Yes, I've been catching up with the trauma of 80s children.
It was in retrospect, it just seemed normal to us, but in retrospect, it was a weird time.
Yeah, if you've not grown up with them, and then you go back and watch all those films en masse, it's quite a shock, isn't it?
There's some weird, wacky, bizarre stuff out there, I can tell you, and I don't know whether it's because there just wasn't as much attention. There just weren't as many strictures around at the time, but there's a lot of like wild experimentation in children's media. If you get right down into the guts of things, like there's a company called you might remember them, Lex, Rankin Bass.
Oh yes.
Remember Rankin Bass? They had this very distinct animation style. They were like it sounds awful to say, but they were kind of like not lower tier, but they were like they weren't as cinematically prevalent as the likes of Disney or Don Bluth. They tended to do smaller projects, with smaller teams, but they pumped out some weird, interesting stuff. A couple of my favorite films of all time from the 1980s, Flight of Dragons and The Last Unicorn.
Yes, Last Unicorn I remember very well. Yeah.
Oh, those are beautiful films, but I'm telling you, there's some dark stuff in them.
Didn't they do some Christmassy ones that
they did?
America than here, but...
Yeah, they were an American company. They did a lot of Christmas, like a lot of Christmas stuff that's very well beloved in the US, in like US culture. In the same way that the Snowman or the Gruffalo is here.
Yeah, they have like their things that are on every year, and I think some of them are Rankin Bass ones.
Yeah, I mean it doesn't exist anymore. I think the Flight of Dragons was their last big project.
Yes. Probably, yeah.
Which is a shame, because Flight of Dragons is amazing. It's a beautiful film. I mean, it's clearly lower budget compared to its Disney contemporaries, and even to like Don Bluth and whatnot. But it's a stunning story, and it's got that very peculiar Rankin Bass style. Where everything has got this like painterly quality to it.
Yeah, there's like a slight. I don't know. Everything always looks a little bit. Almost like worn, if you like, particularly with like the physical animation ones that they do. Nothing looks like crisp and new. And
right.
I don't know if that's intentional or not, but everything looks like it's slightly weathered.
Yeah, it does. It looks like the pages of an old children's book, like an illustrated children's book that's been faded by light and by people touching it and whatnot. And I really like that.
Yeah, I think that's a unique effect, and I like it. Yeah.
But God, that was actually The Flight of Dragons was one of the first films I ever saw, ever.
Really?
Yeah, ever. It's one of those films that is. It's informed so much of everything I love, and it's ingrained so deep. It's one of those films I can replay in my mind from beginning to end, and every scene, every sequence, every line is just there, an amazing thing, but largely, apart from amongst those of us that grew up with it, largely forgotten now. Yeah,
I don't think it's something you see sort of like trotted out a lot, although it might come back, because like I know quite recently I've spoken to Rebecca about this because it's one of her favourites, the Dinosaurs TV show has suddenly appeared on Disney Plus. Now I never would have imagined that would come back in any form. I know it's not come back as in it's not been rebooted, but I mean that like I thought that was one of those shows that it was done and gone and pretty much forgotten about. I didn't think people even had any like nostalgia for it. I kind of thought it was one of those things like Knight Rider, as in people mention it and like, oh, I remember Knight Rider, but no one's going to buy a box set and watch Knight Rider on DVD. And I kind of thought Dinosaurs were like that, but then it's back now and it's on Disney Plus.
And it's kind of huge, isn't it? I mean, I've spoken
about again.
Right, yeah. I've spoken to so many people who remember it and remember it really fondly. They particularly remember the last episode.
Yeah, well, Rebecca didn't know about that, and it's one of her favourite shows.
Rebbie, you never saw it?
No, I never got to the last episode.
Have you seen it? Like since?
No, I've seen some clips.
Right.
But I'm just currently on my rewatch at the moment, so I'll get the full impact of it when I've binge watched it.
Oh my god! Right. In that case, I won't spoil it for you. But
is there any kind of I haven't watched it since it was on when I was a child. But is there any kind of like through narrative, or is it just kind of like, you know, like The Simpsons is like every week, whatever happened the week before is irrelevant and it's a whole new thing. But then you get something like, say, Futurama, where it's kind of like that, but there is a through narrative as well, and there are things that progress. And
it's more, it's more like The Simpsons. It's like episodic,
okay.
Yeah. I mean, there's like consistent elements, like, but they are. In fact, I mean, The Simpsons is a good shout because it mirrors The Simpsons, like, you know, most TV.
The Simpsons point that out. The Simpsons have a reference to dinosaurs on there, where Homer's like, "Oh, this is just like us."
Yeah. So like Homer and Earl are really similar. Yeah. Like there's a lot of overlap there. Just as there's a lot of overlap between Marge and whoever, you know, the I can't remember her name, but the Earl's wife, and so on. You know.
Yes, yeah, I bet. Yeah, and you've got the teenage son who's basically a slightly aged up Bart. And
I mean, the teenage son in Dinosaurs is a really interesting character because there's a great episode which is actually a euphemism for gay culture. So the son comes out as a herbivore. Which is really ill regarded in this society. It's regarded as unmanly and very unmasculine, and Earl doesn't like it at all. He doesn't understand it, and there's like a real tension there. It's kind of interesting. It's kind of a good metaphor, you know.
Okay, how is it holding up then, Rebecca? Having watched it for the first time in like 20 odd years, is it all right, or is it pure nostalgia? As in, like, I've watched things from childhood where I thought, I know this is crap, but I'm enjoying it because I remember the feeling of watching it the first time. Is it that, or is it actually so good?
No, it's actually really good, and I think the reason for it is that stuff that went over my head when I watched it, because I must have been tiny when I was watching it, is actually really funny now. Like, I've just watched an episode recently where Earl's getting really excited because it's time to chuck his mother-in-law in the carpet.
I remember that one. I remember that one.
This, like, whole run up to it.
Is it like a tradition that they have to put the old ones in the tar pit then?
Yeah, so when they get to a certain age, they take them up to the tar pit and dip them in.
And this whole, isn't there, I mean, I remember that episode, but isn't there like a propaganda film in it where they talk about the whole process of why they do it and how much fun it is, you know?
Yeah, because the teenage son's against it, and he keeps like trying to rescue his grandma, and he runs off with her on the day as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think they're showing it to him to like convince him that it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that seems to be like a through line in the entire series. There is this real tension between the young and the old, between like a generational divide. And the world that the dinosaurs operate in is very sort of like buttoned down, very conservative. Things are the way they are, and the children characters kind of flout that in a very sincere way, and they question all of the traditions that don't really make a great deal of sense.
Sure, yeah.
It's a good show, you know. It's a decent show. I mean, it is like, it's very of its era, isn't it? I mean, you can see like the influences from American sitcoms, and The Simpsons is obviously huge. But the world in which they operate is kind of fun. It's got that sort of Flintstones vibe about it.
Yeah,
and the costumes are pretty brilliant, aren't they? Like the effects and everything are pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely.
Does that hold up well then, the special effects in it? I know it has some serious money spent on it, so
as far as I've seen, yeah. I mean, obviously, I'm only sort of partway through it at the moment, but from what I've seen, it holds up well. There's the end of one episode that's really funny where they are, he's stood in the house, Earl's stood there with the baby, and he's been telling him about like what life's like as a dinosaur and everything like that. And he says, and dinosaurs are going to rule the world forever. And they're looking out the window, and as they look out the window, there's cavemen out there trying to make a wheel. And they're stood fully clothed in houses.
Brilliant.
Like foreshadowing of where this is going.
Yeah, right.
Did you read that really weird dinosaur statistic that was going around on Twitter, but it's true, which is really quite something when it shows you a timeline of the T-Rex and when there was the Stegosaurus.
Yeah.
Have you seen this one, Rebecca?
I'm not sure.
Joe's just said he's seen it. So basically...
Oh, I haven't seen it, but I know. What you're talking about.
The T-Rex... Sorry, the Stegosaurus is closer in timeline to the invention of the iPhone than it is to the T-Rex.
Yeah.
Like, between the T-Rex being around and the Stegosaurus is about 70 million years.
Yeah.
Those two did not exist at the same time. Whereas from the Stegosaurus to now is about 62 million years.
Yeah.
So technically, an iPhone is closer to existing at the same time as a Stegosaurus than a Tyrannosaurus Rex was.
Right.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Which just gives you some scale of how long dinosaurs were about for.
That's it. It wasn't just like... It wasn't. It's you get the wrong impression of it when you're a kid. I find largely because of like cartoons and things that just lump them all together.
Like 5 minutes and they were all at once, but it's like no. If it were like the analogy I always hear that is if it were like a football match, dinosaurs were here for like 89 minutes of the match, and humans have been brought on for the last minute.
Yeah,
like that's the equivalent in terms of the lifetime of the Earth.
Yeah,
we even the most primitive version of a thing that you could call human has been here at like a 1,000% of the time that dinosaurs were here. It's just that we evolved in such a way that we had such an effect on the Earth that we kind of feel as if we're the lords and masters of it. But in terms of time, dinosaurs were here for a massively long amount of time compared to us.
And I suppose that largely comes down to the fact that most dinosaur species developed most animal species developed a certain equilibrium with their environment, whereas we don't. We tend to desolate our environments. Have
you heard the theory about the? I mean, we will have to get on to children's films in a minute.
I'm sure. There is a segue here. I mean, there is a segue. I mean, I'm thinking like The Land Before Time,
Yes.
I was going to bring that one up.
We'll get there. Why humans are so evolved? One of the theories is that there was the meteorite strike that was responsible for the Ice Age brought with it a form of bacteria that only infected apes and mutated their brain in such a way that it elevated their consciousness. And that's why humans don't connect with nature in the way that every other species does, because it's like our brains are too intelligent.
Right.
Because they're corrupted by a mutation way back in the gene pool, which made us smarter than we ought to be, if you like. Just like they've done experiments with steroids and stuff on rats, and if you met like 2 of the rats in the colony like super smart with this steroid, they no longer fit in, and the others start killing them, and they start, all the just basic things that you're supposed to just slot in and do. The smarter you get, the harder that becomes.
The harder it becomes, so the more you question,
So there's a theory that some sort of space microbe is responsible for us evolving past the point intellectually where we should have done. So like we shouldn't be as smart as we are.
That's interesting. It's almost like a kind of panspermia, isn't it? The notion
it makes sense.
Yeah, it
when
does
you look at
make
the world
kind of
and
sense.
the speed with which we've ruined it, whereas species that have existed like crocodiles forever don't cause that kind of damage, and you think, that actually makes sense, because it's our intelligence that makes that happen.
I mean, the worst of it is it's not even like the vast majority of human history. I mean, even for the vast majority of human history, we did operate within a certain equilibrium. It's really since the Industrial Revolution that it's really kicked off.
But that adaptability has always been responsible, though, because like other species are like, okay, we live in this part of the forest, we want to expand into this other part of the forest, but then they go there and there's wolves there, so we'll come back so we'll stay where we are. Whereas humans are like, there's wolves there, so then we'll come back and we'll get fire and spears and rocks, and then we'll kill all the wolves, and then we'll expand there. And then we want to go, so now there's no wolves and there's twice as many humans, and now we want to go to that bit, but hang on, there's snakes there, that's all right, we'll club snakes with these sticks, and then and we adapt to stuff and keep spreading, whereas other things don't really do that in quite the same way.
And interestingly, a lot of the other species that do something similar, like for example elephants are responsible for enormous amounts of deforestation.
Yes.
it seems to be the more intelligent animals that tend to do it, you know.
It does, yeah. Which is good for them, but it's to the detriment of everything else.
Right, yeah. Oof, problematic. There's something very dark. There's like a kind of dark path that train of thought leads to.
Well, it leads into traditional Christianity, doesn't it? In that everything works if you remain ignorant. But as soon as you're given free will and intellect and ability to make your own decisions, you start mucking everything up.
Yeah. The metaphor really works. Bizarrely, the metaphor of knowledge kind of works in that regard, doesn't it?
Well, you mentioned Land Before Time.
Yes.
I believe Rebecca watched this last week.
Oh, Rebecca, I'm so sorry.
Yes, I did.
Not because it's a bad film; it's a great film, but man.
Yeah, I never saw it as a kid.
Right.
I think I must have just missed it because obviously, being born in 1990, I kind of missed everything that was before. Because by the time I got old enough to watch it, we were way away from it.
Of course.
But yeah, I put it on and I'm sat there watching it on my own, and then a bit later on my husband came back down to see how I was doing. I'm just sat there looking absolutely horrified in front of the TV.
Yes.
He was like, "What's up?" I was like, "You used to show this to children."
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Don Bluth, man, he's an amazing man, actually. Don Bluth. He used to work for Disney originally. If you look at some of the early Disney films, you can really see the influence of his animation. You can see like the stylistic flourishes that are very redolent.
I always thought Land Before Time was a Disney film for that reason, because it just looks like one. The style of the faces and everything just looks like an old Disney film.
That's probably Don Bluth. I mean, he broke away from Disney because he really disagreed with the corporate influence within the company and the way it was producing products that he thought were patronizing and not doing children any favors. So he wanted to create his own work, which was not patronizing, which was not it didn't talk down, it didn't condescend to children. So you get stuff like An American... Have you seen An American Tale, Rebbie?
I'm not sure I have. What's that one?
That's beautiful. An American Tale is absolutely beautiful. It's one of Don Bluth's breakout hits. It was massive in, I think it was 1986, I believe.
I remember it being on at Christmas every year for quite a period.
Oh, it was massive. Yeah. It was a massive breakout hit. And it's ostensibly, it sounds very simple, and it kind of is. It's a story about a family of mice that cross the sea to come to America, essentially. They are it's the story of the American immigrant, but told with mice. Told with mice. And it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. What's amazing about it is it has all of the funny moments that you'd expect from a children's cartoon, all of the cute characters and whatnot, but at the same time, it doesn't shy away from the darkness and the horrors and the travails that immigrants to the US faced and still face, the things this family go through and the other mice that are around them are incredible and dark and traumatic. And what's so brilliant about it is if you watch in the background, these mice are making their journey to the US just as whole swathes of human immigrants are, but you only see them in the background, you only see them incidentally. It's absolutely brilliant, but it has
I kind of felt like that was put in there to just, if you hadn't got it yet, if you hadn't picked up that this is supposed to be an allegory, then there's your further clue just to hammer that
That's
home.
it. They've got, it's a really dark story in terms of its themes, because they've got this whole thing, the immigrant mice believe, they've been told that there are no cats in America, right? So they are Russian, essentially. The main family it follows, the Mouskovitzes, are Russian, and they are constantly being assaulted by these cats, these Bolshevik cats, and they believe that there are no cats in America. And of course, when they arrive, they find that it's totally not true. There are cats in America. And in fact, the cats in America are in certain ways way worse. Way worse. They fall in with this guy called Warranty Rat, who sells this. He seems to be a rat, and he sells this spiel to the immigrant mice that, if they come and work for him in his sweatshops and whatnot, that they'll be fine and they'll be catered for. Turns out he's a cat in disguise. He's like a very small cat in disguise. There's this whole metaphor going on for how immigrant populations are exploited in the US and how they always have been, you know? It's a great film. It's really dark, and it has this like Don Bluth patina on it, where it feels like there's like The Land Before Time. There is this grim sort of griminess to it.
There's a melancholy feel about the whole thing, isn't it? It's never particularly cheery and like it never feels like that. It's always got a slight air of sadness to it.
You know the worst thing about it? The main thrust of the story is that the main character, who's the son of the family, Fievel, he gets separated from his family at one point. During the crossing, actually, he gets cast off the ship and they think he's dead. It's really sad. And it's all about him trying to find his family as they try to make a life in America. And the film is really bizarrely cruel. So you'll get these moments where they almost intersect. They're like crossing, you know, almost like on opposite sides of the street. And they don't see one another. Or they almost see one another and they don't, you know?
Sure.
It's like, it's the tension in those moments when you're like, just turn around, you know?
Yeah, it's so close. Yeah.
It's tortuous, but what that does when they do eventually sort of, because of course, you know, it does have a nice ending, and when they do eventually get back together, it's lovely. It's really sweet and brilliant, you know. But that's a stunner. I would highly recommend to anyone watching An American Tail, because it's a great example of how you tell a genuinely dark story with genuine tensions and threat and all of these intrigues in a way that's palatable to children.
Yeah. I've actually been following along, looking at some pictures while you've been sort of explaining, and I feel like I may have actually seen this because it looks very familiar, but I think I'd have to rewatch it to really pick up on much. Mm-hmm. But it sounded familiar, what you were saying. The artwork on this actually looks a lot like that on Basil the Great Mouse Detective.
That's one that Don Bluth worked on.
I think quite an early one, isn't it?
Very early, yeah. That's actually one that Don Bluth worked on. I think he may have been the head animator for that one, actually. You can see the influence, definitely. There's something about Don Bluth's style that is very particular. You can see when he left the Disney studios. The transition is really stark, like really stark. He also uses a lot of animation techniques that Disney just stopped using after a while, like rotoscoping, for example, which is where you take live action footage of actual actors and physical models, and then you draw the animation cell over the physical model. It's why a lot of the early Disney films and a lot of the Don Bluth films, the animated characters move in this very sinuous, fluid way that doesn't look like animation.
Do. Yeah, they do.
Snow White was done like that. So if you look at the way Snow White moves, she's really fluid. She looks like a real person in certain shots, you know, in terms of the way she moves. Same with Sleeping Beauty.
Yes. Well, she don't move much.
No, not for very long. Anyway, not for very long in the film.
Can you imagine getting cast in that? It's brilliant if you were to do a live action one. So I'm just going to lay here for 90% of the film.
So yeah, there's a part, you know, about like what 2/3 of the way through the film, you just stop. You just lie down and stop and be quiet for a bit.
Yeah.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. But my God, I remember going to see The Land Before Time. My brother, my mother, and I went to see The Land Before Time, and we just friggin' loved it.
There's loads of them, isn't there? But I don't think I've ever seen more than the first one.
What, The Land Before Time? Oh, there's tons. There's like 14 different films, and the ones after are shit.
I've heard that they kind of go downhill fast.
Well, first of all, it's not Don Bluth doing them, so that's a big no-no for a start. And they are just soulless cash-ins. They're just totally soulless cash-ins.
That sounds about right.
But The Land Before Time has got such heart to it, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, the first one does, absolutely, yeah.
It's got such a wonderful soul to it, and I know what you mean, Rebbie. It's dark. I mean, it's a grim film.
Well, particularly that bit where he kind of gives up after his mum dies.
Yeah.
That they really, really put some welly into that.
Yeah, they sell it, don't they? They really sell the fact that he's like depressed, you know.
Yeah. And I was quite surprised actually by that, because some of the Disney stuff that I've watched as a kid, and I have noticed that it's got a lot less dark as I've got older and seen stuff. But even the stuff that I watched back then wasn't as dark as this sort of stuff.
Definitely not. I mean, I remember watching an interview with Don Bluth, and he was talking about how, with regards to Littlefoot and the death of his mother, he was saying, like, really passionately, look, children, whether we like it or not, go through these things, okay?
Yeah.
They go through every trauma you can possibly think of, and they have genuine emotional experiences. We live in a culture, I mean, he's so eloquent about it. He's talking about how we live in a culture that loves to deny children that, or deny that they do, you know, for the comfort of adults. And as a result of that, children don't get to experience through their media or even in their waking lives what they should in order to emotionally develop. It's something he's always done with his work. He wanted to create work that reflected the emotional reality of what children experience.
Funnily enough, I was on a Sinister Horror podcast last night talking about my book. It's a special series that Sinister Horror is doing where they're having their authors talk about their own work.
Oh, brilliant.
So mine was about my book, The Old One and the Sea. And one of the questions that Justin asked me was why I chose to deal with the subject of grief in there. And my answer was very similar to what you've just said, which is that because it happens to children,
right,
and they lose people, and it's sad, and it's to paint a picture of a world where nothing bad happens and you never lose anyone and everything's happy forever is just really like disrespectful, really, to child intelligence. So whilst the grief of it is, it's not a key plot point in The Old One and the Sea. It's very much like the background of it, you know, the whole tone of the story and the reason Howard is set up the way he is, and the reason he's got this wanderlust is all because of this foundation of the fact that his dad's just died.
Right,
that's very key to it.
Right, like an undercurrent of melancholia that runs all the way through. And a lot of the best children's fiction does have that.
Even the favourite of both of ours, the Transformers movie.
Right.
So much of the decisions in that film, Hot Rod would never have become Rodimus Prime had he not been partly responsible for Optimus dying.
Right.
His guilt for that pushes him in such a way that he brings out the best in himself. And, you know, that death so early on in the film makes the rest of that film what it is. If you take that out of there, it doesn't have half of the weight as what it does. And I think kids can cope with more than people think that they can.
Absolutely. I mean, don't get me wrong, The Land Before Time goes for a fundamental childhood fear, which is the loss of the mother figure.
Yes, very heavily as well.
Really, I mean, we've talked about it before, but Rebbie, did you see, you know, during the fight between Littlefoot's mother and Sharptooth, did you see the point where it cuts away from what's actually happening, but you see it in like silhouette, shadowed on the rock behind Littlefoot, and it's brutal. It's
I mean, they really, really went for that, like with the actual death, with the way that he dealt with it and everything. And I must admit, actually, I watched it and I was thinking about The Lion King when I was watching it, because it's very similar to sort of the whole loss of the father in that one.
Of course.
But I think there's a certain sort of level of respect in it that towards children and towards the way that they would deal with things that The Lion King misses, because Simba just sort of, it's almost like he just sort of gets up and carries on. I know there's a bit of sadness, and the bit where he goes under the paw is obviously probably quite upsetting to a lot of people, but The Land Before Time just seemed to really grab it, hammer it home, and not let go of it.
Yeah,
it lingers.
Whereas The Lion King wants to move on.
Yeah, it does. The immediate thing that happens after that is Pumbaa and Timon.
Of course,
so
Hakuna
it
Matata,
immediately goes into exactly light-hearted. Oh, your dad's dead. Never mind. Let's sing a funny song. You know, it quickly moves on, and don't feel that sadness for too long. We'll move on now.
Right.
It's a shame because it doesn't linger on it.
Yeah, and that happens every time there's something like that in The Lion King. Every time something a little bit upsetting happens, something funny happens straight after.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I never really connected with it particularly well. Although I don't have an excuse for Bambi, but my sister would be absolutely in tears at all of this stuff, and I was just sort of. I just didn't really connect with it in the same way that she did. I mean, I could see that it was a sad thing.
Yeah.
But when something funny happens immediately after, it
does have the effect of diluting it, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's that thing of the Disney films, certainly the ones like from say 1990 onwards. They do. I mean, I have a soft spot for those films, as anyone who was a kid at that time does, and I still love watching them. But it is definitely a flaw of them where it almost like cans its trauma. So yes. it presents you with the traumatic moment, which is actually part of the formula of the Disney film from that era. And then it swiftly moves on to whatever is the next stage in the formula. Whereas Don Bluth's work, it never really becomes formulaic. He always tries to make each moment a thing in and of itself, and then relate that to the wider story. So, like, the death of Littlefoot's mother follows him all the way through the film. It informs everything about who he is and about the world. I mean, it's not just that, is it, of course? I mean, all of the kids in this little troop, this little herd that develops, have all lost people. They've lost their herds, they've lost their parents, and the world around them is kind of dying. There is this underlying darkness to everything.
Yeah, even if they get out of the specific danger they're in now, this is not going to end well.
Right.
There's no ultimate happy ending to this.
Right.
It's dinosaurs at the end of the time when dinosaurs were about. We know how this ends because we live after them.
Mass extinction.
It's we know what's coming here. That's kind of underpins it all, doesn't it? So
actually, I mean,
they get away from the specific danger at that moment, that's still coming down the line for them.
Absolutely. And what Rebbie was saying earlier is really interesting, like comparing it to The Lion King, because in The Lion King, you do get this dilution where Simba's father comes back to him in a very sort of overt and physical way. He actually talks to him from beyond. Whereas Littlefoot, his mother doesn't. He hears echoes of her voice, but they sound more like memories. She never.
What? That's a very good point. The Lion King moment with Mufasa coming and speaking to him feels almost like a get out of the. Oh, he's not really gone. And it's almost like, it's like you were trying to be strict and send your kid to bed early, and then you decided to let him stay up another hour. It's like we're going to have a death, but then we're like, but he's still here. And it's
there's a lovely moment.
As hard.
There is a lovely moment in The Land Before Time where Littlefoot is looking at water that's, his star leaf that he's carrying. Water is collected in it, and it's formed like a reflection. And he does hear his mother's voice as he's looking down at his own reflection. But the way it's framed, it looks like he's imagining her voice there, telling him what to do, rather than it being a ghost or like a spirit talking to him.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think like you guys were saying with The Lion King, it's very obvious that Mufasa's there in the sky and everything like that. And I still took that as Mufasa's dead, he ain't coming back, but here's a ghost, because I mean, the whole Rafiki thing.
Right.
Set you up for that.
Yeah.
But with The Land Before Time, like you say, it's very much a memory, and if you're thinking of someone that intensely, then you do get those kind of memories where you might see them walking down the street. You haven't, but it's the memory of it, or those smells when people say, it smelled like my grandma in here, so she must be in here.
Right.
No, it's a memory thing.
That's it.
And that is the feeling that I got from The Land Before Time, the feeling that he's remembering things she said, so he's following the direction she's given him, and looking down at something, the last thing she gave him would sort of make you think and see them in perhaps a reflection or something like that.
It sort of triggers the association, doesn't it? And it's a mark of how really complex this film is, and how it's intent on not shortchanging its audience, I know that when Don Bluth made a film, he didn't hand it off to another director or whatnot. He's very, very, very hands-on. He wants it to be a particular way and won't let up. Apparently he's actually quite difficult to work for because he has a very particular vision and he wants it to be a particular way, and will not let it go until it's right. And The Land Before Time. I mean, The Land Before Time was a big film. Do you remember there was like promotions for it everywhere? I do remember.
I remember it being advertised almost like a live-action film with the effort that it went in.
Yeah,
went into advertising it.
It was really big. There were like promotions with like fast food chains, it's Pizza Hut and all of that kind of thing. But it never, like all of Don Bluth's films, it never really reached the dizzying heights that Disney was achieving at around the same time. Which is kind of a shame, I find. I mean, now Don Bluth doesn't. I don't think they even produce films anymore, do they?
I'm not aware of any if they do.
I don't think they do. I mean, there is a weird thing that happened with Don Bluth Studios where, and it seems like, and it happened when Don Bluth left it, which is, where they kind of cashed out. And there is this cut-off point where the films take a nosedive and they become exactly everything they hated, everything that Don Bluth Studios was set up not to be. There is an adaptation of Thumbelina, I believe, which is it's essentially they've looked at The Little Mermaid, looked at the success of that film, and tried to make their own version.
I see.
And it just doesn't work. It just does not work.
So Disney had this period, like you said, in the 90s where there's some very good films that we all remember fondly, but they were quite sort of safe and didn't go too far with the sadness. Do you think sort of Pixar, when that then came along and sort of replaced Disney as the main, I mean, it is Disney, but you know what I mean, that replaced the 2D animated film.
Yeah.
They carry a lot more, like a lot of the ones we're going to speak about, carry a lot more genuine sadness and emotion to them than those 90s Disney films, don't they? I mean, the first Toy Story, let's talk about that because they started with Toy Story, didn't they? And the first one is pretty safe and gentle, I think. The Toy Story doesn't really go anywhere particularly sad. I mean, the toys get lost, they have an adventure, and they come home. But the second, and particularly the third and fourth one,
God Almighty,
they've really. I mean, that Rebecca sent me a picture after she'd watched the third one without any context, and I thought she'd just broke up with her husband or something.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, even that said, the seeds of that complexity are in the first film.
Oh yeah, they are. Yeah.
The tensions between the toys are. I was thinking about this earlier. I remember seeing it for the first time, and of course, when Toy Story hit, it was an absolute revolution because like computer-generated animation was really in its infancy back then, and a lot of computer-generated stuff was pretty bad.
Do you know the best thing I've heard about that is actually it's people talk about it with this and Jurassic Park, and they said that both of those films had absolutely no need to be as good as they are.
No, right.
Because both of them use such revolutionary special effects that people would have gone to see them anyway.
Yeah.
Because to see that.
Yeah, totally.
A good example of this is Avatar. As a story, as acting and everything, it's crap.
Sucked.
But it's still it's basically Fern Gully with live action.
It's Pocahontas. It's the white saviour narrative, just like repackaged again and again and again
it's
and again.
Somehow one of the most successful box office films of all time because of the revolutionary 3D stuff that it used. So that is like Jurassic Park and the first Toy Story could have been as shit as Avatar, and just ridden on the coattails of the revolutionary effects they were using.
Well, do you remember?
They didn't though.
Do you remember what it was like when it first came out? You couldn't move. Toy Story was everywhere, and they didn't expect it to be that. That's why it's as good as it is, and it's why Pixar have develop this sort of like lassitude, this creative freedom where they can create these incredibly complex pieces of work. Back then, Pixar were this tiny experimental division of Disney and nobody was paying much attention to them. They were tiny, you know.
We've spoken about this with regards to video games. When
Exactly.
you get that little team who's allowed to just get on with what they're doing without management oversight, they always come out with something brilliant.
That's it. That's what happened. They just left them to it, essentially. And the result is a film that's not only revolutionary in terms of its effects, a children's film, but in terms of what it allows for. Like, for one thing, it completely flouts the established formula of the Disney film. Like, there's no villain.
No, there isn't.
Where's the villain? No. Technically, I mean, the way you can look at it, you could look at Woody as the villain of the first film. He's the one who does everything wrong. You know, he's the one who does the cruel, mean-spirited stuff, you know, when he knocks Buzz out the window.
Written in a different way, Woody is basically Scar in that first film. He's the one who thinks he should be special. He should be the favourite. He has been for a while, but then another one's come along and is replaced, and he resents it.
Yeah. But it's exploring that, isn't it? I mean, what I love about it is, for me, Toy Story, the first Toy Story, represents a kind of the start of a very particular revolution in children's media, in that it's flouting that Disney formula. You are not getting just the established, like the villains who just look and sound evil because they're evil, because they're evil, because they're evil, and that's it. No, you've got these complex problems. You know, Woody is not evil. He's just having a hard time. Things are changing. He doesn't like what's happening. Buzz has his own set of problems, obviously, in the first film, where he believes he's actually Buzz Lightyear. There are all these strange tensions and politics going on, and he acts out. You know, he does something wrong, but then does everything he can to put it right.
I think the very foundations of the Toy Story universe sort of set you up for sadness, though.
Yeah,
because
definitely.
by the very nature of these characters, they've got, literally and figuratively, they've got a shelf life.
Yeah.
However happy they are right now getting played with by these kids every day, that kid's going to get older. They're gone away. And you see this in Toy Story, which is amazing. You see this life cycle. You see them go from being the favourite toys that are played with every single day to being left in a box in the attic. You actually see this happening.
I mean, I think that's what makes Toy Story what it is, not the special effects, although it's very good. It's a very interesting animation style they've gone for with the CG. It's that meta commentary that you don't necessarily, it's not spelled out either, you know, it doesn't make it overt, but there's the beginning of that meta commentary where it sincerely understands what childhood is. In a way that a lot of adults, a lot of creators don't. We've discussed this before, Lex. Like, a lot of writers who write children do it badly.
Yes.
Like, really badly. They just make them like vessels for adult concerns. Or they idealize them in a particular way with reference to adult prescriptions. They've forgotten what the actual experience of childhood is like, whereas the creators of Toy Story remember it with such detail. They remember, like, you know how Andy plays with his toys in the first film, where it's just these wild flights of invention, where there's no, like, he doesn't restrict himself to a particular franchise and play within the prescriptions of those franchises. You've got, like, the cowboy doll with the spaceman doll with the squeaky shark with the Mr. Potato Head all thrown together in these incredible scenarios, and there's this wonderful, like, lack of self-restriction to the storytelling, and that is how kids play games.
Absolutely.
I remember doing that.
Yeah.
You know?
I only had 2 of the turtles because you couldn't get them at first.
Right.
So I had 2 turtles, so they'd be with the 2 Ghostbusters I had and one a He-Man.
Yeah.
Just all in one thing, and you just make it work regardless of the size differences.
Yeah.
And,
it's part of the reason why the film works to adult eyes, because it necessarily evokes that slight melancholia and that wonderful nostalgia about being a child. You remember what it's like, and by conjuring that, it immediately evokes its loss as well.
Yeah, that's the whole point. You know that it's got a shelf life on it.
It's sweet.
This whole period is not going to last forever.
Right, and it doesn't sell you short. You know, it doesn't sell its audience short. It does that thing that Don Bluth films do, where it wants, like, the hero, the protagonist is Woody, but he's a powerfully ambiguous character in the first film. He's really flawed. He does some terrible things, you know.
Well, he's used to being the favourite, and he likes it, and he expects that's going to last forever. But of course, it's not. One way or another, he's not going to be played with every day, either because another toy gets bought or because that kid ages out of him, or, you know, it's going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's it like underlies every interaction, doesn't it? You know that these days, these sort of like halcyon days that this film is conjuring, they're going to be over so soon.
Yes, but the fact that you see that, like, if you'd have told me when that film came out that there were going to be 3 more, I would have just assumed that they'd all be set when Andy was a kid, and that not much would particularly change in the background. It's just another adventure with the toys. But the fact that they actually sort of happen almost in real time, I would never have expected that.
No, I wouldn't either.
That was a complete surprise to me.
And Rebbie, I'm so sorry that we made you watch Toy Story 3. It's great, but oh my god! I mean, I went to see that at the cinema? I actually took a service user with me, and I was in bits. I was in absolute bits by the end of that film.
It's a difficult film. I mean, I am really glad that I watched it, because the thing with me and Toy Story is, when the first one came out, I think that was probably actually one of my first Pixar films, if not the first Pixar film that I saw, and I was about the same age as Andy.
Right.
So then it didn't particularly, I didn't really pick up on any difference really with the second film with that, and it never occurred to me that it was going to age in the same way I was aging.
Yeah.
So, and like with the actual toys and the way that he plays and things like that, that wasn't really the way that I used to play as a kid. I was a bit different as a kid. So, like, with the exception of Polly Pockets, where my dad had to be the Polly Pockets and I was the dinosaurs, because I had a lot of like boy toys, if you like, as well as girly toys, because all my cousins are boys.
Right.
So I had like dinosaurs and toy cars and stuff like that. So other than getting my Polly Pockets wedged in toy cars constantly, I would attack the Polly Pocket thing with the dinosaurs. That was the most sort of imaginative, if you like, that I really got with toys, because I had like Barbies and stuff like that, but I would act out what was happening, what I'd seen happen, if sort of thing. So like for example, my Barbie went out with Action Man and Ken was the friend that would come round,
right?
Because that's what I'd
choice
seen.
Though, isn't it? I mean, that Action Man is a much more attractive option, isn't it? Really. Set that one with shifty eyes, because I always thought that was weird.
As an action feature, it's slightly strange, isn't it?
It's odd, isn't it? Yeah.
I've never, like, Action Man is one of those really strange boys franchises that I've never understood.
Same here, because I've never seen the appeal of soldiers. If there's no monsters or superpowers around, I'm out. I'm not
likewise,
interested.
like that was the same for me with like G.I. Joe.
Same.
Like,
yeah.
I never understood as a kid why, given the choice, you've got, like, in the 1980s and early 1990s, as a boy, you were in like Hog's Heaven. There was like He-Man on the shelves with monsters and demons and like mutants. There were big monsters you could buy. There were transforming robots that turned into planes and dragons. And why would you settle for the little man with a gun?
Don't get it. No.
I don't get it.
Though, that, with regard to toys you had as a kid, Rebbie didn't have a Mr. Potato Head.
Oh, did you not, Rebbie?
No, I never had one.
Oh, wow.
I bought one and had it delivered.
They were kind of like, I remember like the Potato Head toys. I mean, they've been out for ages, haven't they? They've been out since like the 70s, the Potato Head
Older
toys.
than that, because originally they were just plastic pieces that you put in an actual potato.
Was it indeed?
From like the 50s. Originally, and then
how
the potato
friggin'
came
cheap
later.
is that?
I know, it was just like eyes and a hat and stuff.
Oh my god, that's kind of brilliant though, isn't it? I kind of love it.
Yeah, I think that's. When I discovered that, I thought that was great. Yeah.
But,
see, what's weird though is that that's how I thought of Mr. Potato Head, was just the bag of eyes and things like that you would stick in an actual potato, and I don't know how I knew that, because, like I say, the first Pixar film I saw was probably Toy Story, and there was already a plastic potato in that.
Of course,
obviously, because Mr. Potato Head is now a character.
Yeah.
So I'm not quite sure how I knew about that, because apparently it didn't become a plastic potato at that point.
No.
Which I kind of thought that the plastic potato thing came from it being in Toy Story.
It was already. I think it was like George said. I think it was a 70s.
Yeah.
But the concept of Mr. Potato Head had existed before that, but it was just a toy.
It was just a potato with. Yeah.
Can you imagine how bleak they could have made Toy Story though if it was an actual potato that was going to rot?
That was going to rot. Oh my god! I mean, like. Hey, there's a kid that's going to become a horror writer to write like zombie apocalypse fiction in the distant future.
Well, to be fair though, which Toy Story was it where he went into the little boy's room where he'd massacred all his toys and made them into monsters?
That is actually Toy Story 1. Yeah, that's Sid.
Is that the first one?
Yeah, I mean, even he's not a villain. Really?
Not really. He's just like a kid who's rough with his toys. But I mean, as far as he's concerned, they're inanimate objects. So...
Right. I mean, what I've always found interesting about Sid is he's quite negatively portrayed, isn't he? You know, but he's also really clever and inventive. I mean, like the mutant toys that he makes are actually brilliant.
He's not now.
They are pretty awesome.
He'll be sat in a care home permanently because he's traumatised after a toy spoke to him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's no getting away from that. That's long-lasting damage.
Did you guys see the little cameo he had in Toy Story 3?
No.
Towards the end, if you look in the background, you know when Andy's taking his toys to the little girl, you can see a dustbin man, right? And you only see him from the neck down, but he's got Sid's skull shirt on.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't think anything of that, but yeah, now that you say...
It's kind of implying that that's Sid.
Okay.
Yeah. Huh.
No, that's good. That's interesting.
At least we know he's living a good life.
He's all right.
Yeah, he's all right.
After the toy spoke to him.
Yes, after
therapy for a few.
But let's not forget when we're saying he's not a villain.
Yeah.
Those weren't his toys he was massacring. He was
true.
taking his sister's toys.
That's true.
Yeah,
I mean,
fair point.
He's like a disturbed kid, isn't he? That's basically it.
Yeah.
And there's when you see inside Sid's house, you do get the impression that the family life isn't quite as happy as Andy's.
Yes, I get that too.
It's very much set up that way.
Speaking of the villains, you know how you said like Woody sort of is in the first film? I can't really remember much about... I don't think this really applies to the second one, but the villains in the third and fourth are basically the same idea but taken further.
Taken to extremes, yeah.
Like Lotso Cuddles in the third film was basically where Woody would have gone if he hadn't reconciled with Buzz.
Yeah.
This is a favourite toy who has been replaced.
Oh, Lotso. I mean,
it's basically the same thing.
Lotso is painted as a real villain, isn't it? And he is. He's a twisted guy, is Lotso. I mean, he's allowed his pain to turn him into basically a Nazi. You know, he's like totalitarian, isn't he?
But his backstory is devastating.
It is. And Lotso's backstory, it's what Rebbie was talking about earlier. Lotso's backstory demonstrates just how awful the life of toys in this universe actually is.
When he comes, he gets lost and then he finds his way home and he looks through the window and his owner's playing with a new one of him.
It's just thing.
And awful.
You know like the toys, their entire culture, there's something in them. Like there's never really any commentary on whatever metaphysics animates the toys or whatever enjoins them to be as they are. But there is all the way through this implication that the toys absolutely adore their children. They connect with them.
Though. I think it is love because when you see all the Buzz Lightyear toys in the shop, they're not alive, are they? It's not until someone takes them home, is it?
No, one of them is alive because in Toy Story 2 it replaces Buzz for a brief period.
Oh yeah, it does, doesn't it?
It's like old Buzz though. You know, the one who thinks he is a space ranger.
Still, that's the basic mode, isn't it? Before they adapt to.
Yeah, basically, it's really dark. Lotso's backstory is awful, and it does, as bad as he gets, it does really engender a sense of pity for him and for them all, you know?
Yeah.
His backstory really upset me.
Yeah.
Was I think it's the worst thing that upset me.
What else got you in that film? The furnace scene gets everybody.
You know, when it came to I was like, is it gonna do it? Is it going to like go down this route? I was like, and
Is this going to be the end of this? Yeah.
The metaphysical stuff where they make peace with the fact they're going to be destroyed. I was like, oh my god.
Yeah.
It's actually not what you would think about that upset me though. In that, well, it didn't upset me, but that got a reaction. It was when the little green aliens saved them.
Oh, the claw.
Yeah, it went, the claw! And I was like, oh!
Brilliant callback, eh?
Especially because I thought those little green aliens had been run over earlier.
Yes.
In the film.
I just love the fact the little green aliens have, like, from the first film on, they actually have, like, a running story arc.
Yeah.
Where they get adopted by the potato heads and become their kids, quote unquote. Just brilliant.
Yeah. And actually, though, going back to what you were saying about it being love that brings them to life, weren't all of the little green aliens alive in that vending machine?
They were, that's right,
Yeah. But I do think with that, the theory is right if it's not originally a toy. Because is it the fourth film that's got 4K?
That's right.
It's 4K, but also Bo Peep's not a toy, she's a lamp. She's
that's
like
a
figure that was broken off a lamp.
That's right,
yeah. Andy's sister. She's not meant to be a toy.
That's right, yeah.
No, and I didn't realise that until that last film.
Yeah.
I don't think... Did it actually outline that she was a lamp before that?
You see her with it. I think you see her with it on the film. Yeah.
But
I just love they brought
definitely in
back.
their case, I feel like that's love that makes them come alive.
With Forky it is. With Forky, definitely.
Yeah.
I just love they brought Bo Peep back. I love it. Because, of course, she just, there's a wonderfully melancholy scene. I think it's in Toy Story 3 or 2 where Woody is addressing the remaining toys and he talks about the ones that they've lost.
Yeah.
And Bo Peep is obviously one of them, who was his love interest, of course, in the first film.
Yeah.
But the bringing her back and making her like this different character, I mean, that's what 4 were you guys like really worried about Toy Story 4?
Yeah, because it seemed completely unnecessary.
Right.
I thought it was done with 3. That was it. It's finished and wrapped up as well as it could be.
A rare example of a perfect trilogy of films where every single one is perfect, When 4 was announced, I was like, oh no.
Same.
Oh no. And then I went to see it, and I don't know how. I honestly don't know how they did it. But they not only made it a brilliant film in and of itself, like a brilliant film, and wasn't it wonderful to be back with these characters? Wasn't it wonderful to be back in this world? It made it like the perfect capstone to the story. Because it's like, it actually is about change in a way that even the other films aren't, Yeah,
because even the third one's quite a safe ending when you think about it. Like, all this stuff you've seen before, it'll still happen, but just with a different kid
right.
now. It's a little bit safe in a way.
Yeah, it's cyclical, isn't it? So it's like the cycle starting again. Whereas 4 is actually much less conservative. It's about breaking the cycle. And
it's a proper ending, isn't it?
I love the fact that Woody, who has been like the toyest toy of them all, he's always wanted to be owned by someone. He's always wanted to be the prime toy who's bringing joy to someone. Realizes that, you know what, I've done it. And I don't want to do it anymore. It's not what I want anymore. And it's time to move on. The fact that there is a life for these characters, for these toys outside of the playroom.
Yeah, because he's been a kid's favourite toy, and then he's been another kid's not favourite toy.
Yeah,
and he's been at the top, and he's done it, and he's quite happy to sort of move on and not really be anybody's toy anymore.
Right.
And it's quite, and then I think that is very much influenced by, I can't remember the name of the doll with the voice box problems in the antique shop.
Yeah, I can't remember her name.
She spent her whole life wanting to be somebody's favourite toy, and he sort of sees how devastating that can be if you get too attached to it.
Yeah.
And he's been trying to get attached to the idea. He's got attached to the idea of trying to be the little girl's favourite, like he used to be with Andy, and he kind of sees she's where he could go if he doesn't sort of change his track. You know?
Yeah. It's again wonderfully sad, and it's a really adult lesson to be imparting to its audience, to children. You know, there is an underlying like harshness, but it presents it in such a wonderful way, where it basically says, you know what, change is inevitable, and the best way you can deal with it is by leaning into it, by celebrating it. And sometimes what you think you want or what you're enjoined to want is not what you want.
Yeah. But I did kind of feel like Toy Story 4 was aimed more at people who were grown up like us, but were kids when the first one came out, rather than being aimed at kids.
Yeah, definitely.
I feel like that. Particularly because if you had like an 8-year-old kid who'd never watched any of the others because they're too young and you hadn't got to them yet, you wouldn't have just taken him to see Toy Story 4.
No, of course.
In lieu of nothing. It's very much made for people who've grown up watching the others.
It's kind of a love letter to the rest of the series, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, I really hope they leave it at that. I can't see why they do anymore, but it's Disney, innit? So...
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I could see them potentially doing, I mean, the way it's open-ended at the end, they could do like a series or something. That would maybe be interesting.
I still kind of hope they don't. I think it's nicer thinking that's obviously it's not the end of the story. These characters continue to exist, but it's nice to think that that's, you know, whatever they do next is not our business, if you like.
Yeah.
Just let them go off and live and do what they need to do. We don't need to keep checking in on them every 5 years.
Right. Let's move on to something new now. Yeah. No, absolutely. I agree.
Yeah. I agree with that, and I think the thing is, I think I had a different reaction to these films coming out than you two did, because I stopped after Toy Story 2 because I just assumed they were going to be kids' films.
Right.
I never really expected them to age with me. So although I'm obviously older now, when I watched Toy Story 3, the part that really, really got to me and gave me the full-on reaction, I was a mess at the end of that film, was when Andy finally took the toys to the little girl and he was sitting there and explaining every toy to her.
Yeah.
You got that love that came across with the toys. You got that they had been an important thing to him and that he wanted them to be an important thing to her. And the fact that he then played with her with them and stuff like that. That was the thing that really set me off, because I've always been very attached to things like that. More so actually than I am with people.
That is
probably the same thing when I said to you about the Dollmaster horror film getting to me more than other horror films. Again, it's dolls.
Yeah.
And I had a very, very strong connection to toys and things like that when I was a kid. So I think for me, Toy Story 4 then coming out was more of an exciting thing because I'd only just watched Toy Story 3 anyway.
Right.
And they were both out anyway. It's only since I've got Disney Plus. So when I watched Toy Story 4, that's kind of like almost like an additional, and it's all going to happen again.
Yeah, but... like an extra almost.
So yeah.
No, I mean that scene at the end of Toy Story 3. I mean it evokes like what is almost a universal experience, which is that last time. When you play with your toys, or when you do grow up and you do give them away, you know, you put them in the box and you give them to whatever, like the car boot sale or the charity or the play school or whatever, and it is a sincere moment in many children's lives, isn't it? There's like a growing up element to it.
Yeah, very much. Yeah.
It's ritualistic almost.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Because it's whether it's because you're moving out or whether you just consciously make the decision that I don't want these anymore or whatever it is, it's like drawing a line under something, isn't it?
Yeah.
In a very particular way, and you don't quite have that with anything else as an adult. You know, like your TV breaks, you get a new TV, or your games console, you want the new one, you get the new one. You don't have that same emotional,
that
I no longer play with toys sort of thing.
That almost like transcendent moment where things are remarkably different from how they used to be now.
Yeah. I mean, I still buy toys, but I just don't play with them now.
I mean, likewise. I love my toys. I really do.
Did you see what I bought last week? I got a new Skeletor and Panther.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, there's a new set called He-Man Classics, and they look exactly the same as the original, but they're better articulated.
Yes, yeah, they're from Matty Collectors, aren't they? That one.
Yeah, so I got Skeletor and Panther to put him on.
Brilliant.
But I got them from an actual toy shop rather than, which was amazing. I was in Smith's Toys, so which is in the place in Sheffield. Rebbie will know it, where Toys R Us used to be. So I got a lot of my actual He-Man toys from there as a kid.
Oh my god!
And it was so exciting to find it and come out with it. I'm stood in a queue holding these things in my arms, and there's all kids in the queue behind me buying stuff, and I'm like, I don't give a shit. I'm not even slightly ashamed.
There's a lot of association going on there, isn't there? That's brilliant. That is absolutely brilliant.
Do you know what I remember getting from there? That Dragon Walker thing. Do you remember that from He-Man? It used to go on like a track and then spin round and keep going. Do you remember that?
Yeah, God, Jesus.
It was the loudest thing. It sounded like you've got lawnmower on in house. Like, turn around. I'll have to send a video of it to Rebecca because she's got no idea what I'm on about. But it was like a dragon head that went along this track.
Like
and
a
then
track,
it would get to the end of the track, and the track would rotate around to then be more track, you see, and it would keep... Very clever little system, but it was so loud.
Yeah.
So loud.
It's the kind of thing that like parents hated, you know?
Yeah. It was just, I saw that in that toy. Something about buying a toy from an actual toy shop. Because, like, as an adult, most of the time when I buy toys, and I'm sure it's the same for you, I'm getting them from places like Forbidden Planet or like collector's shops. But to get it from an actual toy shop,
it's nice.
There's just something special about that. And, of course, the price were a lot cheaper as a result.
Yes, of course. No, it is a lovely thing. I mean, I still get a little bit of frisson when I go into, like, a Smith's or whatever, and I see, like, the Transformers aisle.
Yeah. I love going in toy shops, just for the sake of it. I don't usually buy anything. I just like looking.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm having that. That's getting on my shelf. But
I remember having a wonderful experience when I was like a teenager, and I was still like collecting Transformers and whatnot at that point. And there was this like tiny little independent toy shop that opened up in my town. You just don't get them anymore like that. No. It was called Brown's, and it was like the tiniest thing that had opened up in this tiniest shop. But somehow, somewhere, they'd obviously found a cache, like an old depot of 1980s Transformers that hadn't sold.
Oh, wow.
So they had like wall to wall, like the Headmaster Transformers and like Six Shot, the one that could turn into six things. And it was like, at that time, you just couldn't get them. They were gone, you know?
That's really good. Did you hear on the news last year that they found this old toy shop in Scarborough?
Yes. Yeah.
They had a load of like He-Man toys and Star Wars toys and stuff, just sort of locked up.
Yeah.
Because he'd gone out of business, shut up shop and left it, and then he died.
God.
And like 30 years later, they'd opened the shop up again when someone else had bought it, and it were full of like 1970s and 80s toys still in the package.
That is mad. That cash. I mean, you know, on a purely mercenary level, that's probably worth a lot of money.
I bet it is, but I'd have loved to walk in and see it. I mean, it'd be dusty, but see it unchanged, the displays and everything.
Yeah, God.
Do you know what I did see in Smith's is they had that from Transformers with the three heads. They had him in Smith's. You know, the Judge.
Oh, the Quintesson.
Yeah, they had that.
Oh, wow. I mean, it's the first... I mean, there have been Quintesson toys before, but not like that.
It looked just like the movie version.
Yeah.
It looked just like that. I liked that a lot.
I like the Quintessons. They're lots of fun. They should do more with them in the fiction, though.
Yeah, I think they're a really weird element of the Transformers universe. But yeah, I'd never seen a toy of it before. It's one of those things like Unicron that I always wanted a toy of. But that's quite interesting when you think about it with regards to Toy Story, though, with regard to franchises, is that they don't really... I mean, there's a character that's blatantly meant to be a sort of He-Man toy.
Yes.
And then you've got the Evel Knievel guy, Duke Kaboom, who's Keanu Reeves, who's basically meant to be that classic Evel Knievel toy.
Yeah, that everybody had. Like, it was like there was a period when that Evel Knievel toy with its launcher was everywhere. But
beyond that, the toys are all kind of like one-off things, aren't they? They're not really meant to be alluding to other franchises. Like Buzz Lightyear's nothing, is it? It's not meant to be from Star Wars or whatever. It's just it's completely own in-universe thing. And I think that's a clever idea, because it would have been so easy and lazy to just do parodies of every famous toys, you know?
That must have been the temptation. And it's clear that when you watch the first Toy Story that they obviously want to evoke the types of toys that kids have.
Sure.
And they have knowledge of what those things are, you know? Of what, like, boys of that age and that era really liked. But rather than doing direct, like, parallels, they went for their own thing. The Buzz Lightyear thing is so clever, and I remember recognizing this even when I was a kid, that it evokes in that brilliant way the culture of toys of the era. So it's one of those toys that hits, and something about it chimes like with the culture, and it takes over everything. Everybody wants it. There's like it's insane. You can't get it anywhere. It's the toy that everybody wants.
And that happened in real life with it.
Of course, yeah. I know that's the weird thing. You had this. I just so remember you had this weird thing of like art imitating life, imitating art, imitating life.
Yeah.
Where the big Buzz, the big Buzz Lightyear toy that they released, which was just the exact replica of the one.
Even the packaging.
The packaging was the ship and everything. You couldn't get it anywhere, could you?
No.
It's sold out.
It was that year's people fighting over it in Toys R Us thing.
Right.
Madness.
Absolute bonkers crazy madness. I love the fact that they comment upon the phenomena in the film, and then they cultivate the phenomena in real life. I love that. I love it. Those Buzz Lightyear toys are amazing as well.
Yeah, they were good.
Those original Buzz Lightyears that are massive, and they do everything that the one on screen does.
Oh yeah, it's exactly. It's like it's taken right out of the film.
Yeah.
And just given it to you, and it's really good. That
I loved it. And did you see in Toy Story 2 where clearly the Buzz Lightyear line has expanded a little bit in its latter generation? So there's like you can get the bad guy, Evil Emperor Zurg.
Yes.
Who turns up at the end and is basically a Darth Vader parody.
He is, yeah. They could have done a lot with him.
Funnily enough, Disney did do it was well late on though. It was after it's sort of in the early 2000s or mid 2000s. They did a Buzz Lightyear Star Command cartoon. And
wasn't that meant to be the cartoon that Buzz Lightyear's from?
Yes, that's
rather than being the toys.
That's it. Yeah, it is actually Buzz Lightyear, from in universe. And the Evil Emperor Zurg is the bad guy in that. And it's actually it's a lot of fun. It's really good. It's silly and slightly sarcastic, but also has like a really good sort of action, sort of like comic book rompy thing about it.
Yeah.
And sure. Zurg is brilliant. Zurg is actually the best thing in it because he is like a supervillain, like a galactic supervillain, but he's also really dry and sarcastic.
I like that. Yeah, I liked it. I kind of got the feeling if they'd have kept Zurg as one of the toys, he would have been another one of them. Because there's a lot of subversion with the characters. So, Rex is supposed to be the big scary dinosaur, but he's actually like a really cowardly, gentle sort of thing. Yeah. Like Zurg is meant to be this evil emperor, and to start with, that's exactly how he acts. Because just like Buzz Lightyear, he's like pre-programmed to think he's actually that. Yeah. But once he realizes he isn't, then you would allow him to develop his own personality, and maybe he's really gentle, or maybe he's really camp, or maybe and they could have done something with that.
That would be fun, actually. That would have been a lot of fun. But he only occurs in the toy store, I do believe, in Toy Story 2. You don't really see him outside of that.
And he's still stuck in that format of thinking he's the real thing.
He's actually Evil Emperor Zurg, yeah.
He's not given the time to develop beyond that the way that Buzz does.
Kind of a shame, but of course, they couldn't take him too far because they already have like a quote-unquote villain character in Toy Story 2, which is Stinky Pete, the prospector.
Yes, he wants to be the full set and everything, yeah.
Again, like another one of the great villains in these films, because unlike the Disney villains of yore, who are largely, most of them don't have any motivation at all, they're just evil because they're evil because they're evil because they're evil. Stinky Pete, again, is this really sympathetic character. He's had enough, man. He's like, he's part of this really classic toy range, which nobody cares about anymore. And all he wants is a nice, quiet life now.
Yeah, absolutely.
I totally get it. Comes from. Yeah. I totally get it, like all of the villain characters, he takes it too far. and ends up being rather cruel as a result. But I can understand.
I like a villain where you get it.
Yeah.
I really do. And something Rebbie and I spoke about recently is I don't know if you've watched the latest Marvel series, The Falcon and Winter Soldier.
I haven't yet.
Very good. But there's a character on it who's from the comic books, obviously, because they all are, whose name is John Walker, and he is a soldier who is a very, very good soldier who is he's set up to be the next Captain America.
Got you.
He is a really good guy. He's won every medal going in the war, in various military campaigns. He's saved lives of countless people, like put himself at risk, defied orders. He's like the perfect candidate to be Captain America, but he carries a lot of guilt with him because, and he says this quite frankly, a lot of he says, I went out there and did things I was ordered to do, many of which mean I can't look myself in the mirror anymore.
Right.
And then I come home and I'm given a medal for this. And he's deeply troubled by this. But then he's told, you're going to be Captain America, somebody that he grew up admiring and watching and everything. And he's like, this is it. This is an opportunity to do something that's purely good.
Yeah.
Where I can do something where not only am I being told that I'm doing something good, but I actually am. I actually feel like I am, so this is going to be good for me. And then he's put in this impossible situation where he's up against a team of terrorists who have all got superpowers. And he doesn't, because he's got the costume and the shield, but he hasn't got the power that Steve had.
Right, interesting.
And he's got his best mate who's been through all the conflicts of war and everything with him, and they kill him. And he gets hold of the super soldier serum and uses it on himself. And the serum, as per what it explains in the other films, it enhances what's already there. Yes. So all his self-doubt, all of his rage and everything is just enhanced by this. But he is actually stronger than Steve Rogers ever was because, it enhances what's already there. He was already like a top-class physical specimen of a guy. Who's now got this serum, whereas Steve was like weakling sort of, so in a physical strength, he could out bench press the original Captain America quite easily. So then he's like murdering these terrorists and he can't stop himself doing it. And there's what's become already an iconic image of him like bludgeoning one of them with the shield, and it's covered in blood. Yeah. And it's like, and then he's besmirched what's supposed to be Captain America's legacy. But it's like the journey of him getting to that and what happens, you totally get
totally understand.
And you're like, I see he's not just like some hoorah, I'm going to be Captain America and I'm a dick. No, he's not a likable person, but you really get it and you sympathize with him and you understand why he's being pushed to this. Yeah. And then he does have a redemptive moment towards the end, which I won't spoil, but which is brilliant. But his whole arc, and I think this is a good villain. This is a good villain because he's got weight to him, he's got depth, and you understand why. Even if you look at his actions and think, yeah, that's not okay, dude, you understand why he's come to this. Yeah. And it's amazing that of all the film franchises you can think of, it's amazing that Toy Story does this so well.
Yeah.
Every time, with every villain that they've got, it's always someone that you think, I get why they've become this.
Totally, yeah. They are relatable. They're totally relatable in their flaws. And that's a brilliant thing, because it's something that a lot of not just Disney, but a lot of children's franchises of the era, children's media just didn't do.
I don't like Loki. I don't see the popularity of him. To me, he is a pointless villain. What's he want? He wants wealth and power and a throne. He's got that. He's a Prince of Asgard. Everything he does is basically just like, hee, I'm evil, I'm going to tie you to train tracks. That's like his entire personality.
Like the vaudeville villain, yeah?
He is. I don't understand his motivation or anything. It's like, that character is such a shallow, old-school comic book villain. He is entirely carried by the charm of Tom Hiddleston playing him.
I think that's a significant part of why he's so popular.
None of all the depth of I was so worried when they brought Thanos to screen, because Thanos in the books is one of my absolute favourite villains.
I love him in the comic books. Yeah, I love him in the comic books.
He's so layered, and I thought they're gonna get this wrong. They are not gonna give him this nuance, but they so didn't. They got him so right in the film. the way he's portrayed, the way Josh Groban voices him, Josh Brolin, sorry, voices him, and the depth he give him, and the soul he give him, and the fact that you kind of sympathise with him to a degree. It's like, I was not expecting them to give him this gravitas at all. And I was really impressed with that. I really was. But that to me is how you make a good villain. But I just don't understand the popularity of Loki, because he's lacking all of that. It's purely Tom Hiddleston's charm, I think, that does it for him.
I mean, they've done it really well. I've always found with like the Spider-Man villains, even in the bad films, they do take time to give the villainous characters a certain degree of motivation. I mean, even the worst of them, which is like Norman Osborn, the arch villain of Spider-Man. Certainly in the first film, there's a lot driving the guy underneath what ultimately makes him into the Green Goblin.
Yeah, he desperately wants his company to do well, so he can give his son a nice life and not have to worry about money. He's losing this government contract, which, by the way, was supposed to be recreating the super soldier serum, but they can't call it that because they didn't have the rights to Captain America.
Of course.
If they brought him back now, they could mention that.
Yeah,
but that's
easily.
what he was trying to recreate. But all the trials on animals that they'd done, it gave him the super strength, but it made him insane.
I mean,
he can't get cleared for a human trial, so he does it on himself, and what happens? He goes insane. But it all comes from a point of trying to do something good.
It's fascinating that. I mean, I like that very, very much. I mean, sometimes what I hear about Captain America and the Winter Soldier, the new series, is, I haven't watched it, but I was talking to Kit Power about it recently, and he said, like, what it does is that it takes that tendency that the MCU films have of taking the revolutionary character and then making them into a villain, essentially, like villainizing the revolutionary, and upends it. The villains in that series, the antagonists in that series, are much more interesting, complex, and nuanced than in the films.
They are. I mean, they still absolutely cross a line. But what's interesting about it is that even people within that group think that. Like, it's a bunch of people who start this movement based on what happened with the half the planet disappearing and then coming back. It led to an awful lot of refugee situations, and people quite literally returned home to find someone else now lives in their house. And every country in the world had to deal with this. And a bunch of people so there's like a repatriation act going on, and there's like refugee camps, and there's a group of people who are fighting back against the way that's being managed, because it's being done in the name of money and whatnot, rather than, and some of them manage to get a hold of the super soldier serum and become like physically powerful. Right. But the idea is to do it through political movements and shock and awe and stuff, but not actually hurt anybody. But then a bunch of them start hurting people, and we can make more of a point if we start killing people and stuff. But even some of them within the own group are like, whoa, that is not what we, So even within the own group of the quote unquote bad guys, there are people who think, this is not what we were supposed to be doing. It's very complex.
I'm really glad that they've taken like Thanos's Malthusian nonsense and have actually used that as a basis for further storytelling. I think that's interesting, because I personally never liked the Malthusian stuff they give Thanos. It's stupid. I think it just never made any sense to me why this extra-dimensional entity who has seen the rise and fall of civilizations can't get that Malthusianism is nonsense, which, like these lowly humans, Terrans disproved in the Victorian era. That I just hated it. I hated that motivation. The notion. And also, I mean, it doesn't make any sense. It makes even less sense when you take into account the Infinity Gauntlet.
Yeah.
The Infinity Gauntlet makes you God, essentially.
It gives you omnipotence, but not omniscience. That's the thing. So to do anything that isn't simple wish making, yes, it has the power to do that, but unless your mind is like way beyond a mortal mind, you couldn't think of what else to do. Do you know what I mean?
The thing is, though, like, Thanos could. Thanos is this he's phenomenally intelligent. He's phenomenally intelligent and imaginative. I wished what they'd done with Thanos in the films is not motivated him. Not bothered. He's called Thanos.
Yeah.
I.e. death. He's elemental death. They could have suggested stuff rather than trying to make it this sort of very specific thing. And I think what they did when they took the Malthusian archetype of villain and applied it to Thanos is killed it. I'd never liked it. I never liked what they did with it. And it's a shame because there's a lot of potential in Thanos, but I do love the idea that they're taking the notion of the blip, and they're using that.
It's actually been used as a plot point, because I was worried that
I think that's brilliant.
Get forgotten about. Because, like, in the film that immediately follows on from it is the Spider-Man one.
Yeah.
And it's kind of just like some kids are 5 years back in school now, and that's it. There's no they don't really deal with it in any way. It's just kind of, okay, we've dealt with that, let's carry on. And it's, there's no real consequence to it.
Isn't there a new Doctor Strange film in production as well?
Yeah. Yes.
I seem to remember hearing something. I'm kind of excited about that because, I mean, Doctor Strange is my favourite of the Avenger characters in the MCU. I always like, give me the occult sorcerer character any day of the week. But now it means that he's not going to be limited or beholden to the MCU stuff. It can be its own thing. It can be its own story. It can branch out into I mean, obviously, Lex. I mean, I know you love the comics. You must know about Doctor Strange and the Lovecraftian stuff that he gets into, and the extra dimensional shenanigans, the other sorcerers that he fights. Dormammu, all of these gods and godlike things and infernal entities. They can go for that now.
Well, the Doctor Strange film is going to follow on from WandaVision as well, if you haven't watched that yet. There's some quite strong ways that ties in.
I haven't, unfortunately. I mean, I've heard good stuff about WandaVision.
Rebecca really liked that one, didn't you?
Yeah, I've done an article on that one.
Oh, did you? Oh, I'm going to have a look at that, because I haven't sat down and watched WandaVision yet.
I would watch it before you read it, because there might be some stuff that spoilers, you don't want to read.
Spoilers, okay.
Very good. It's very good. The way it's layered is like you watch the first few episodes and you don't quite get what's going on, but it builds up. Well, I did because I've read the comics, but it's designed so that you don't know where this is going and what's happening. But then it builds up to something, and it's great. It's really, really cleverly done. It's like old TV where you have to watch it 1 week at a time and pay attention. You can't sort of binge watch it while half paying attention to your phone.
Oh, that doesn't work. You've got to sit and concentrate. Yes. Oh, that is interesting.
Something Rebecca said in her article, which is 100% accurate, is that there were a lot of people complaining about it, saying, "Oh, it didn't explain this, that, and the other." But no, it did. You weren't paying attention.
And maybe that's the point, I mean, maybe it's not trying to cross every T and dot every I. Maybe it's giving its audience a little bit of respect.
It gives you enough to put it together if you're focusing on it. If you're paying attention, everything is there for you. It's that you've got to watch it. You can't half be on it.
Don't do what I have a tendency to do and put it on in the background and go and make bread or something.
No.
Oh yeah, you can't do that. Not with WandaVision and not with the Falcon and Winter Soldier thing either. What I'm finding with these series is that they are very visual. So it'll give you enough verbally, but you need to be looking at the screen. And I think part of what puts people off with WandaVision is the actual style of the episodes, because I've heard a lot of people complaining about the style of the first episode, and I think it's distracted them from what's actually going on the screen, because they're annoyed for some reason that it's in black and white, so they're not paying attention.
They're not giving it long enough to see why it's in black and white and why it looks like a 50s sitcom. That's the whole point of it. That is a key plot point.
I'm so intrigued now. I am so intrigued. I mean, I the bits, the clips I've seen of WandaVision and the pictures I found really interesting, because it doesn't look like a Marvel superhero story.
Very clever. Have you heard that quote as well from it, which Vision says, which is one of the best quotes from that entire film series? He's talking about grief.
No, I don't think I have.
Wanda's talking about, because obviously Vision dies in the Infinity War.
Yeah.
She's talking about not being able to let go of him and everything, and how can she let go of him if she still loves him, and talking about grief. And Vision says the quote, "What is grief but love enduring?"
Oh wow, yeah, that's kind
which
of
is such a good quote.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
And Vision is still Paul Bettany, yeah, is that right?
Oh yeah. All
brilliant.
Cast is the same. Yeah,
brilliant.
It's very. It starts off and you're like, what the fuck is going on? That's the point.
It's fine by me.
It starts explaining it as it goes on, and things start unraveling.
That's fine by me. I like that kind of storytelling.
Yeah.
I like, give me something that's a little bit weird and a little bit experimental, as opposed to like the prescribed and the standard.
I think you would really love WandaVision. I really do. I think it'd tick all boxes for you.
I may have to indulge. I mean, I'm pouring through True Detective again at the moment, so that's.
I've only ever watched the first season of that because I heard that it's crap after that. So.
I've just finished rewatching the first season and I loved it to bits. The first season, the Lovecraftian stuff in the first season.
Yellow,
that just does it for me. I love like the little suggestions of occultism, and never actually it never quite tips over into full-blown like supernatural stuff, but it just suggests enough. I'm struggling with the second season, I've got to say.
I've heard people say that. I've never even bothered to, because there's that many series. I don't want to force myself to watch them.
It's not bad. It's not like terrible at all. I mean, it's not like it's well shot, it's well written, it's well acted. There's a definite atmosphere. There is a story building here. It's just. It feels like a different show.
You've always run that risk with anthology stuff. It's like American Horror Story. Some seasons of that are brilliant, and some of them are terrible.
Oh, some of them are just... the one that did for me is the third season. I was like, oh...
The Witches one.
Yeah, screw off.
Yeah, that just felt like some Buffy wannabe sort of thing. Yeah, I wasn't into that at all.
And what really saddened me about it is the subject matter is great.
Yeah,
like the history of witchcraft in the US, the influence of the development of voodoo culture, all of that is amazing stuff to work with. What a brilliant subject, but they turn it into like you said, like Buffy crossed with the X-Men, with Harry Potter, and no, I mean it's a personal beef for me, but I in any mythology, I loathe that notion of magic being something inborn.
Yes.
I hate it, especially when it's referring to ritual magic. No, you learn it.
I love that quote in Doctor Strange where he says he's watching what the what's she called? The Ancient One is doing.
Yeah.
And he's like, how the hell can I learn to get there? Yeah.
Tilda Swinton.
And she's like, you're a brain surgeon. You're the greatest brain surgeon in the world. You can take a completely paralyzed, immobilized person and reattach brain stems and make them walk and live again. How did you learn that? And he's like, decades of years in practice. And she's like, well, there you go.
There you are, yeah. Actually, we may have discussed this before, but I loved the way the Doctor Strange film portrayed magic.
Yeah,
I loved
it's just something you can learn. It's just something you can learn. Just like we learned to master electricity. Mm-hmm. It's something that's there, and you've just got to figure out how to use it.
I loved it. And I loved the visual representation of it. I mean, now it must be the first time in cinema history for me where magic is being portrayed in a way that feels real and believable, and it looks like a technique. It looks like something you can do.
Do you know that Benedict Cumberbatch was insistent that he does different hand gestures for every spell does them the same in every one. And you can see that. If you watch every one of his appearances, when he does this spell, the Bands of Sitarak, he does his hands in this particular way. When he does this spell, the shields, he does them in this particular way. And it's consistent throughout.
That's great.
He was insistent on that.
I like that a lot. I mean,
so it's like a martial art thing. You know?
Love it. Absolutely love it. And it's just, I want to see a bit more now. I want to see
his fight with Thanos in Infinity War was brilliant.
That was good. Yeah, I enjoyed that.
He's whipping out everything. I mean, you've got to against Thanos. You can't hold back for 1 second.
Of course.
Just two rules if you're fighting Thanos. Don't go one-on-one with him, because the Hulk sees what happens to that.
Yeah.
You cannot beat this guy in a fist fight. It's not going to happen. He is the epitome of raw strength. You are not going to beat that in a fist fight. And don't get in close. Keep your distance and keep changing your attacks, which is exactly what Doctor Strange does. And he's such a brilliant visual showcase of what you can do with Doctor Strange in that film.
Yeah.
Because, more so than the actual Doctor Strange film, because at this point now, he is the Sorcerer Supreme by the time we get to Infinity War. So he can bust out all these amazing visual stuff rather than just the basic stuff.
Well, he's kind of on the hot foot in the first film all the time, isn't he? Because he's not quite there yet. He's not quite baked, you know?
But yeah, the way they showcase his skills in Infinity War is fantastic. There's some really good visual stuff.
Also, I mean, like the first film has Mads Mikkelsen in it, which will just, you know, that's an automatic win. It's an automatic win insofar as I'm concerned.
He's gonna be in the Harry Potter films, isn't he?
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of the Harry Potter franchise, I've got to admit, but
no, I'm not into it at all. He's going to be in something else as well, but I forget what.
Yeah, I read he's in something significant, isn't he? And I can't.
Yeah, it's gone.
I can't quite remember what it's going to be. I'll probably watch it, whatever the hell it is, because doesn't matter to me. Have you seen? I mean, it's obscene. Have you seen the bloody photographs that float around of him? It's obscene. No human being should look that good in everything.
I really loved him in Doctor Strange. I thought he was great.
He was a great villain, wasn't he?
Flat villain, and yet he gives him such life and makes him interesting.
He does, doesn't he? I mean, I like the fact that he's kind of like, there is like an almost utopianism to him.
Yeah.
I mean, it's deluded because Dormammu is not the gateway to any like great transcendence or anything like that. It's totally deluded. But I like that's his motivation, you know. It's not like, oh, I want to conquer the world or anything like that. He wants to like transcend humanity. He wants to make a better place for us, you know.
Yeah.
But sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, I think that a deluded villain is always interesting as well, as opposed to pure evil for the sake of evil. Someone who thinks they're doing good but isn't. That's always interesting as well.
I mean, at the moment, I'm trying to rack my brains trying to think if, like, any of there are not that many of the Pixar films that actually have, like, antagonists or villain characters in the same way that the Disney films always did.
No, I don't think there is.
A lot of the time they don't. It's more just like situations. Like, I'm thinking of my favourite of the Pixar films, which is Ratatouille.
Yes.
There's no villain in that.
No.
The closest you get
that needs to be gotten out of, isn't
it? The closest you get is Anton Ego, I suppose, the critic, and he's not a villain.
No, he's just doing his job, and he might be a bit belligerent about it, but he's that is his job, is to criticise food.
Right,
so.
And of course, by the end of that film, he's actually part of the mechanism that allows things to get better. That speech at the end of Ratatouille, when he gives you his review, is beautiful. It's beautiful. It's so well written. It's so elegantly relayed by, of course, Ian McKellen, who plays Anton Ego. It's such a beautiful film. I think that Ratatouille is massively underappreciated in the Pixar stable.
I just don't think it. I don't know. I don't think it landed quite as heavily as some of the other massively popular ones, did it?
It really didn't. No. And
have you watched that one? Ratatouille wasn't pushed as much.
Yeah, it was probably out at the same time or near to something else that really was a big thing, and that probably took the focus off.
Because I feel like there's kind of like this main Pixar films and then this secondary Pixar films with the way that they're actually pushed.
True.
And I think Ratatouille was one that they didn't probably expect to do very well, so they didn't really hammer it home as much as the others.
Yeah, I think you're probably right, because it is a weird idea. It's a very strange idea. And also, I mean, have you ever listened to interviews of people who work in animation talking about food? It's one of the worst things to do in an animated film. Yeah, they hate it. Well, it's one of the things that's horrible to do in cinema in general, or visual media, because in terms of continuity, it's a nightmare.
Oh, I bet, yeah.
Of course, because you're often shooting out of sequence, you know. So
you've had a bite of that sausage, but it's meant to be a full sausage again, and now you need a new sausage, and of course,
exactly that. In animation, it's even worse because you've got to. It's very difficult to render with any legitimacy, by all accounts. It's very, very hard to do, and with Ratatouille, that's what it focuses on.
Okay, yeah.
It's almost like a deliberate challenge, you know.
Yeah.
And also in terms of its story, it's just strange. It's an odd bit of animation because it's not really about anything.
No, it's this sequence of things that happen. It's like Seinfeld in it.
Yeah, there is this wonderful like slice of life quality to Ratatouille. That's very sort of casual and very, very Parisian, ironically, which is where it's set, you know. Where it is just it's people living their lives, it's people getting on with things, and I kind of love it for that.
Yeah.
But I do get the impression that it probably doesn't land as hard with kids.
Do you know another one that fits in that exact category, which is one of my favourites, is Inside Out? I have never seen any kids particularly passionate about that.
But it's so good, isn't it?
Yeah, but everyone I know thinks that is an adult.
Yeah.
You never see toys of it. You never saw a lot of stuff in the Disney shop for it. It was never massively popular. You talk to a grown-up about it, and they'll rage for ages like we're about to. But you kids, there's no kids who've got that as a favourite Disney film.
I think
maybe it goes over their head a bit.
I think you're right, Rebbie. I think that's exactly it. Maybe with Inside Out, maybe they pitched it maybe a bit too high.
Maybe. There's some. I mean, the whole concept of it is deep, anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like the feel of Inside Out is through an adult looking back.
Yeah.
Very much, as opposed to like the Toy Story where it's a child looking forward.
Yeah.
But come to think of it, not that I talk to many kids, to be fair, but when I went to my sister's 30th a couple of years ago, she actually had a Disney-themed fancy dress party.
Oh, brilliant.
So we all had to pick characters and go. And there was one person there as Sadness from Inside Out.
Oh, brilliant.
So, and I hadn't even thought about watching it at the time.
Yeah.
But it's,
I love that the whole concept of it is genius for a start.
Yeah.
And the fact that they grow as she grows. So, like, they all start as very basic emotions, but then as she's getting older, they realise that it's not that complicated. Like, that whole idea of she's got this memory, which is her happiest memory ever, but then they realise that the reason that memory's so happy is because an hour before that, she was really sad.
Yeah, it's brilliant, isn't it?
Is just as important as the happiness, and that is how real things work, and that is brilliant to explore in such a way.
It refers back to what we were talking about earlier, you know, with regards to Don Bluth's films, where there are certain creators of children's media who just respect that children are emotionally complex beings. And I love the fact that Inside Out, because, you know, if there is a villain in Inside Out, it's happiness, isn't it?
Yeah, it actually kind of is, yeah.
She is trying, she's trying to insist upon herself.
Positivity.
Exactly, yes, she's exactly that, where you're trying to force it. You're trying to force yourself to be happy because that's what the world is telling you that you should be all the time.
Yeah.
And it's saying to children in a very visual way, you know what? No, it's okay. Yeah. It's okay. If you feel sad, you feel sad. And maybe there's a reason for that. Maybe it's worth exploring, you know. Maybe it's even worth feeling. That's all right.
Yeah. Can we just talk about Bing Bong for a minute?
Oh,
God, I know. That was one of them where, like, you have to pause the film after it for a minute and get your breath, like you've just been winded. You're like, hold on, just give me a few minutes here. Jesus, that was... So, just to briefly explain that, in case anyone listening hasn't seen it. So, the character of Bing Bong is an imaginary friend that the little girl who is the protagonist of the film had when she was really young. Yeah. And he's like an elephant made out of candy floss. And he exists... This girl made him up in her imagination when she was little, and then has sort of forgotten about him because she's grown out of him. But he still exists in like the deeper remnants of her mind. But if you stay in there for too long, there's like a level below that, right, where you no longer exist at all, and she's completely forgotten about you. And he's in this level where he's not fully forgotten, but if he goes any deeper, then he will be. Kind of like an Inception thing, isn't it? Really?
Yeah.
And he has spent the last few years, from her being about 3 to the age she's now, which is about 11 or 12, he spent all that time trying to make her remember him so he can come back and be a part of her life again. And then one of the key emotions of the little girl, Joy, ends up trapped in this level with him. And they have this plan to get out together. Mm-hmm. But it becomes very apparent to him that the method he's devised by which they can escape is only going to work for one person.
Yeah.
And he decides that it is far more important for her to have back joy in her life rather than remembering her imaginary friend. It's okay for her to let that go. And he realizes that and sacrifices himself to let joy go away. And it's just the way they deliver that. Like he and her always used to have this game where he used to say, take her to the moon, which used to mean literally, because she's a child, let's jump on this rocket and go to the moon. But then as Joy is going back to be, a part of her brain again, he says that to her, take her to the moon for me. But now it's a metaphor for make her happy again, give her a nice life, and he fades away, and it's just
it's brilliant.
Devastating.
It is,
awful, but brilliant at the same time.
It's kind of unexpected, It comes.
Really didn't expect that when he jumps out of that cart so she can fly up into the sky and everything.
Yeah.
And then she looks back and he's fading away already, and he just says, "Take her to the moon for me."
Yeah,
it's God. That's such a blow. That's such an emotional blow.
I think again,
and they don't come back. You kind of expect that later on she'll suddenly remember him again, and here he is. But no, they stick with that, and he's gone. And
it was a more traditional Disney film, he would have.
Yes, absolutely. I was expecting that. I kept thinking they're going to bring him back, but they don't. And it's really... Any adult that you ever say that quote to about take her to the moon is just like, oh, that's awful.
Well, it's brilliant because it evokes, again, it's not just about the loss of the character in the story. It actually evokes a much wider thing, a much more universal experience, which is the knowledge that that things do fade and things do have to be given up and things do die or pass on.
Never going to be that age again. That's never coming back. That time of your life is gone now. However much you might lament it, it goes one way, and that's gone now.
It ties so beautifully into the whole theme of the film. It's telling kids that it's okay to feel sadness. You don't have to put on a face. You don't have to pretend or try to force yourself to be happy. And then it does something that actually evokes that sadness.
Yes.
It's clever. It's clever stuff. It's edgy. It's quite edgy for a children's film to do,
Did you get that? Did that one at you, Rebecca, with Bing Bong?
Yeah, I'm just going to go and find a tub of ice cream, start crying into all over again now.
Yeah. That is, I mean, I will throw a little caveat on that one, for the audience. It is a tub of ice cream moment. It's really sad, and actually that vein of melancholia actually runs throughout most of this film. It's really clever. I like it.
Like you said about Ratatouille, it's not really about anything. Really. Externally, there's not that much going on.
No.
It's all about what's happening within Riley's mind, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
There were a couple of things I really liked about that film. A funny part, particularly, but I think we can all relate to it in some way. Not necessarily the way it was done on screen, but when the boy sees Riley and everybody in his brain just goes into complete panic mode.
Yeah.
That was very clever. It's like they've suddenly entered adolescence, and these guys aren't qualified for that because they've only been a child up to this point, and now they've got to do adolescence.
Brilliant. I just love the fact that it's acknowledging that kids have an interior life at all. There isn't much in the way of like popular children's fiction that does.
No, it's very, very clever and very layered and very well done, and the lessons it teaches and everything is really unique. But I just think, like Rebecca suggested, I think it might have been pitched a little bit too high.
I think it may, because there's a lot of in order to get like the full impact of that one, there's a lot of like unpicking that needs to be done, isn't there? Like the visual metaphors that are being brought up and whatnot, which it may be a bit much, it may be a bit too much for its intended audience. Maybe not, I don't know, but it definitely hasn't made the impact that some of the other Pixar films have.
No villain again.
Yeah, no villain. What if we're going for like the really sad stuff, what about the first 20 minutes of Up?
I knew that was coming. Yeah. God, I didn't expect that.
That
because
did
it's
for
real.
me. I
Did me as well.
I went in the cinema. I was gone. First 20 minutes, I was like, Jesus.
Do you know one of the reasons that hit me as bad as it did is because more or less what happens there has happened to a very close friend of mine.
Right.
He fell in love with a girl. I knew both of them. And he's actually one of my best friends. I go on holiday with him every year. No, normally, not at the moment, but
yeah, of course.
And he fell in love with this girl, and they bought a house together, and they were getting married and everything. And then she suddenly got very ill, and she got diagnosed with like an adult version of leukemia.
Yeah.
And within 6 months, she was gone.
Yeah.
So all the plans that they'd had, everything he thought his life was going to be, everything he'd envisioned was just taken from him so quickly.
Yeah.
And everything that you'd imagined it was going to be was upended.
Of course.
That's what the beginning of Up is. There's no fantasy elements to it. There's no magical, it's a real thing. She's not pushed off a cliff by a lion and this is she just gets ill. They have a plan for this life together. She gets ill. Like that first scene where they're running and she staggers a bit and he goes to help her, and then you see her in hospital and you're like, oh God, they're not going to do this. They're not actually going to do this.
And they do. I mean, the complete bastards. They completely go for it. And again, it's really showing respect to its audience,
Absolutely doesn't hold back on that at all. It treats it really expects it. You can handle this, and the kids can handle this, and it's so beautifully done, but it doesn't hold back on it, and it's so real, and that's I think one of the reasons it's sad, because it is a real thing. It's not a deer getting shot by somebody and the deer can talk. This is a real thing that happens, and some of us, like I said, know somebody who's had that exact thing, and it's really, really powerful.
There are like layers of sadness that build up through the film as well, aren't there? Like there's the alienation of the little boy. He's a lonely and slightly strange little boy, isn't he? He's not like everyone else, And there's a wonderful metaphor there for like neurodivergency. It's great,
I definitely read him as like an autistic kid or something.
Yeah, and then you've got the alienation of the protagonist as well, of the old man, Carl, and it's so sweet. I love the fact that they find some kind of reconciliation and healing together in one another. That's a beautiful thing. I love the message of that. I love it to bits, like this cross-generational healing.
Yeah, one of the things that makes Up so special is that the story itself, him going in the balloon and finding this island that he dreamed of and following this explorer, all of that's kind of incidental.
Yeah, totally.
It's not the point of it like it would be in a lot of films. The point of it is him dealing with this like lifelong grief and finding some way to be happy again and moving beyond it. That is the point. What he's doing on the adventure is kind of irrelevant.
Yeah, totally.
I feel like Pixar does that a lot, though.
Yes.
Like, it gives you, this is what they're doing, but it's not really what this is about, so watch it, but pay attention to this other thing.
Yeah. The subtext, I mean, it's Pixar films for me, they do represent, like, collectively the beginnings of a revolution which is kind of filtered down into a lot of present day children's media. So I mean, Lex and I have talked about things like Gravity Falls. We've talked about a lot of the cartoons that are being produced for television or for networks or for even on the internet now, which are aimed at children, which are so sophisticated.
I was massively surprised by Gravity Falls. Rebbie's watched it as well now.
Yeah, it's good, isn't it?
I do need to post you the journal, George.
I've still got to send you that bloody the Dark Judges things. I've got to find them out. That's the thing. I will get them to you ASAP.
Rebecca's had the book. She's borrowed the journal.
Yeah, the journal's amazing.
Yeah.
Again, I've done an article on this and the series as well. So I really, really liked that.
But it's the stuff like you were saying, like the layers within it and the sophistication within that as a series.
Yeah.
I mean, as we've spoken about many times, I love all the stuff of our childhood, Thundercats, He-Man, all of that. But it did not have the layers in it of something like Gravity Falls or the modern DuckTales.
It's totally true. I mean, Likewise, I love all that shit, but I know it's shit. You know, I know it's crap. I mean, and it is. You know, a lot of it is absolute crap. You know, it was produced at a time when under the auspices of Thatcherism and Reaganism.
Yeah.
So it was designed to sell products. You know, it was designed to advertise to children, which is why, like in the episodes of Transformers, in the early episodes, you get literally these catalog lines of the toys. You know, the animated models are all lined up, and one of the Transformers is saying their names, and they're transforming. It's a toy catalog. It's a toy catalog.
Yeah. The end scene, one of the final scenes of Gravity Falls, is by any margin one of the most powerful sort of conclusions to anything I've seen. Where Stan, the main guy, is facing Bill, the like interdimensional Lovecraftian god thing.
Who's awesome, by the way.
Brilliant. In his brain. They've fooled... so what's happened is that this interdimensional entity needs to unlock this secret to travel beyond this town, and it's stored within the mind of Stanford Pines, this guy. So he goes inside Stanford's brain, but actually he's gone inside the wrong person. He goes inside Stanley.
Yeah.
And they've got this device which they're about to use, which will wipe Stan's brain and at the same time destroy Bill because he's trapped inside his brain. And all that is in Stan's brain is himself sat in an armchair watching a television. He's got his till stuffed full of money, and he's got a photograph of his family.
Yeah.
Because these are the only things that matter to him.
Yeah.
And he doesn't call attention to that. It's just there.
It's just there, yeah.
And you just see what matters to him. And the fact that it includes a picture of the kids and his brother is beautiful. And Bill's like screaming at him, like, I'll give you money, I'll give you power, I'll give you everything you could ever want. And Stan's just not fazed by it at all. And he says, you made one mistake, Bill. You shouldn't have messed with my family.
Yeah.
And it's just the way he delivers that is so powerful, but matter of fact at the same time.
Well, it works so well. Like, I mean, in context.
Because the characters built up to that point, and you get Stan.
Yeah.
Few things matter to him. You can do most stuff, and he don't care. His shop gets destroyed constantly, and he don't care. But you don't steal money from him, and you don't fuck with his family.
Yeah.
You learn this throughout the show. Those are the two things you do not do.
And it builds slowly.
That massive. It does. The layers it gives you to this character, because you start off thinking he's just a bit of a jerk, but you learn so much about him.
And he can be a bit of a jerk. I mean, sometimes he is a bit of a jerk, you know?
Yeah.
But so are the other characters. All of the other characters have their foibles and their little ambiguities and whatnot. You know, Dipper can be a bit of an arse sometimes, quite frankly.
He's a very typical selfish, like, just pre-adolescent boy in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, he is. But his relationship with Mabel's brilliant.
Yeah, it is great.
The sibling relationship's great with those two.
It's a great show. I mean, and it is an example of exactly what I'm talking about with regards to just how sophisticated children's media has become. You know, it starts. I mean, you can trace the roots back really far. You can trace it back to Pixar, then further than that. But the real revolution started with the likes of Adventure Time and Steven Universe.
Yeah,
which are cartoons that really want to talk to their audience about things.
Yeah, it's like, very different from like half an hour long toy commercials.
Totally. I mean, when I first started watching Steven Universe, I was like, these are metaphors for things like gender identity and for bodily autonomy and so many complex, interesting notions. This is like the antithesis of everything I was subjected to when I was a kid, you know?
Yes, absolutely.
This is brilliant. This is amazing. And I still think it's amazing. And the fact that trend has continued in children's media, to the point whereby you're getting stuff like the regular show, stuff like, as you said, the new DuckTales cartoon, which is sadly now finished, you know? Amazing stuff. Amazing stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of pushing the boundaries of what you can do, but I do wonder if a lot of these are made, like we said before, by people who were not given much oversight. They weren't producing this so they could sell a load of merchandise or whatever. So they were kind of allowed to just have creative autonomy over it.
I think that was definitely true of Gravity Falls. Gravity Falls has got that all over it, hasn't it? It feels like a weird little thing that someone maybe took a chance on.
Yes.
Mm.
And was just left to its own.
There's a lot of love in that.
Yeah, definitely. And the fact that it hasn't gone on, there was a story to tell, and it's kind of been told.
Yes. Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
Love it to bits.
And I like that you're allowed to feel that bit of disappointment that it's finished, but you're getting stuck with that. That is going to be a bit of disappointment that it's finished. That's it. It's done.
Yeah.
You've had the story. Because too many things now just keep carrying on.
They just keep going, don't they? Yeah, it's the Walking Dead syndrome.
Oh yeah.
Where I can't
believe that's still going.
Yeah, but I've heard everyone I know who was into it seems to suggest that it's gone on far too long.
Oh god, yeah. I mean,
I
watched the first 3 seasons, and it's like it's very good in those first 3 seasons for setting up like character tensions, and the notion of the zombie apocalypse is great. It's really well handled, but it's ultimately what you realize is that it's a one-trick pony. All it's doing is like taking the situation one step further. So how much more extreme, how much more terrible can we make this situation for the characters? And it just keeps doing that. And once you realize it's doing that, you're sort of like, oh, well, I don't care anymore,
Yeah, it desensitizes you to its own point. It's rinse and repeat. Yeah. Basically, it's Coronation Street.
Yeah, in its own, you're right, in its own weird way. It's almost like it's like the horror equivalent of a soap opera, where you once you realise that it's going to kill off key characters, it's going to like really hurt them, it's going to make key characters very ambiguous, they're going to have to do some terrible things in the interest of survival and all that kind of stuff. Once you realise that's what it's doing, it's like, well, that's it. It really doesn't have anything else, unfortunately. And because it doesn't have anything else, it just doesn't sustain. By the end of season 3, you're bored.
Yeah.
That's interesting that it gets boring that quickly.
Yeah, it does. There's just not enough storytelling there. There's not enough in the universe to warrant. If it had gone for like 2 or 3 seasons and then ended, built to a finale or a climax and then ended, it would probably have been really good. But it just keeps going and going and going, and it's sort of like, okay, well, we've seen what you're going to do, show,
Yes.
There's not enough material here.
And the thing that's a shame as well is that so fast they went off the source material, because I've got the compendiums and there's so much more to it, and like we've got the games as well, and I've been watching as Gary's gone through the games, and there's so much more to the games, there's so much more to the compendiums, and then this show is just like, oh, it's happened again, let's move on. Look, we found somewhere safe. Oh, it's no longer safe.
That's
I wonder
the
why they did that if there's so much source material. Is it stuff that can't really be filmed easily? Or?
Not really, no. I mean, it's all stuff that you'd find in a zombie apocalypse, so most of it is fairly easy to film. Like, you could even do it on a reasonably low budget.
Okay.
So
it's not like it goes like crazy in a way that you couldn't, do in a film or anything.
No, I mean, all the zombies are just zombies. They're humanoids, so they're not difficult to render.
It's very much on a level with what they have done. It's just that what they have done is a bit brain dead.
Yeah. It's the fact that like it's like, for me, it's equivalent to like the pornography films. When you realise from pornography films that all they're going to do is show you like extremes of bodily mutilation, you become inured to it. It's sort of like, well, that's the worst you've got, isn't it? There's nothing underneath. There's no storytelling. There's no like wider ramification. So once you get that, it's like, well, it's boring now, isn't it?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
It's kind of like that. I mean, to be fair to The Walking Dead, it does do more than that. It really is trying to show you like what happens to human beings when they're under incredible and insane duress and when there are no good choices. Unfortunately, it's not good enough to carry that off. It just keeps going for the most extreme choice, That's the formula. Okay, we've reached this impasse. Let's go for the worst choice imaginable.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's important.
And to be honest, I think a certain amount of it is fan opinion and a popularity contest.
Yeah.
I get the feeling that they're watching what people's reactions are to each character, and then that's where they've gone wrong with the source material, because somebody likes that character, oh, we'll keep them in, we'll get rid of this one instead.
Yeah,
and stuff
I
like
hate
that.
I hate when things start getting tailored according to what the fan, so like this guy was supposed to die 3 issues, like 3 series into it, but because he's a fan favourite, they keep him around another 8 years, and then you lose everything about them that was interesting to start with,
It makes the storytelling reactionary, doesn't it? Which is immediately bad. It's immediately bad. I mean, there's a great quote. I can't remember who said it, but what a famous writer once said, if the audience knew what they needed, they'd be the writer.
Yeah.
Sometimes the writer's responsibility is to tell the audience what they need, not cater to what they want.
Yeah, but you could also argue that, like, no, this is your story to tell. They can write fan fiction however they like.
Totally true.
This is my story to tell, and in my version, this guy dies after 3 episodes.
It's why I really hate the last Star Wars film, what was it, The Rise of Skywalker?
Yeah.
Hated it. I hated it. I'm not that big a Star Wars fan anyway, so I'm not invested. But I hated the fact that because the really conservative portions of the fan base reacted so badly to The Last Jedi, they immediately rewrote everything. They changed everything to cater to those reactions. And I was like, oh no.
Yeah, so characters who should have been a big deal weren't a big deal, and things that had been written off were brought back.
The bullshit of bringing Palpatine back, I'm sorry, the total pandering bullshit. You know what? Star Wars fans should have been insulted by that, because that is pandering. That is like patting on the head and oh, we're going to give you this nice safe space to play where everything's familiar, and oh look, here's the villain back. It's like, oh no, after all the good work they did in The Last Jedi, I mean, for all the problems that film has, as a non-Star Wars fan, I really liked it, because
I liked it too.
It did fun things. It liberated the notion of the Force, for example. So suddenly you've got this situation where, oh no, it's not just Jedi. This is not exclusive to these very conservative quarters. Almost anybody can utilize it.
Well, they even set that up with The Force Awakens, because you see that Finn is Force sensitive. He's not a Jedi, but he can use it to some degree. It's like it's an energy that's there that is accessible to all. Right. It's just that Jedis can access more of it.
Yeah, and that notion of in The Force Awakens, they set up this really wonderful notion of Rey, the new protagonist. She's Rey from nowhere. Yeah. There's no backstory for her, and that's really cool. It's really interesting.
That in The Last Jedi.
Yes.
Because Kylo Ren says your family's nobody. They're not anybody important. You were just abandoned because they didn't give a shit. That's it. There's nothing more to it. And then they just walk back on that and say, oh no, it's Palpatine's granddaughter.
You're Palpatine's granddaughter. It's like, fuck off. Honestly, stop patronising me. Don't talk down to me, I really hated that. And also, I mean, there is also the fact that a lot of the conservative Star Wars fans were reacting to the fact that, oh, there's a woman who's a protagonist now. They hated it. It was just misogyny, it was really frustrating. Frustrating.
The thing with what was I going to say? Well, Snoke was obviously set up as the new villain, and then he just sort of disappeared and went nowhere, and that was ridiculous. But the thing with Luke that they didn't like was that, I don't know, it's that childish belief that you've not seen a character for 30 years, so when you check back in with him, they'll be exactly the same as when you left him.
Exactly.
And it's like, well, of course he wouldn't. Yeah. You don't know what he's been through in that time. He's still not going to be the fresh-faced hero who didn't really have let's be honest, didn't really have a personality the original film.
It's true. I'll tell you what, Mark Hamill's acting in The Last Jedi is way better.
Oh, he's learned how to act.
And also Luke is a much more interesting character now.
The fact that he's so terrified, he's always been terrified of he himself becoming his dad.
Yeah.
But he sort of manages to circumvent that. But then he sees, just for a second, that his nephew, the grandson of his dad, has some of that darkness in him.
Yeah.
And he panics and tries to kill him. And then he's like, Jesus Christ, what did I just do? I'm becoming him. I'm going to end up like my dad. I'm killing kids now.
Yeah, right.
So he exiles himself. He exiles himself away from it, and he cuts himself off from the Force, and he's like, no, not even risking it. I saw what happened with my dad, not even risking that.
Yeah.
That is a brilliant character arc.
Yeah.
That is such a good depth to add to Luke Skywalker.
I've got to say.
And people hated it.
They hated it.
I don't get why they hated it.
They hated it. I know. It's kind of what makes me withdraw from like fandom cultures a lot these days, where there are these really rather nasty reactionary, very conservative portions or quarters of them that feel as though they own the franchise, as though it's their garden and their ideal version. You got it a lot with The Last Jedi. I mean, there's a guy I don't like very much who was sort of part of like this fandom culture, and he said he kind of vocalized everything I hate about those cultures. He said something like, oh, well, we didn't like those SJWs coming into our Star Wars. It's not your fucking Star Wars, mate.
No.
You don't own it. You don't write it. It's not up to you.
No, I agree.
Fuck you.
Yeah.
I could get quite nasty about it, It doesn't belong to you. And also, it demonstrates how little these self-proclaimed like super fans who feel as though they own the franchise, it shows you how little they know about the franchise, because A, I'm not a Star Wars fan, but B, go back to the original Star Wars films and lo and behold, you have these revolutionary things like, for example, Princess Leia, the female character, actually being way more competent than the big hero,
Yeah.
which was revolutionary at the time. Not only that, it's an anti-Nazi film. It's in the wake of things like Vietnam, It's a film where the main bad guy is dressed like a Nazi.
Yeah.
It's like that. Those stylistic references are not incidental.
No.
And yet somehow these idiots miss it,
I think it's quite interesting that they talk about the originals as if they're so special because of George Lucas, and yet when he was allowed to make films in that franchise entirely unencumbered by any other creative influence, they were terrible.
They were terrible. And not only that, I mean, like, the original Star Wars films, I'm not that invested in them, and they've got their problems too. The scripts are terrible. Yeah. The scripts are terrible. The dialogue is awful in most of them. Well, I understand,
there's an awful lot of nostalgia that goes into that. Just like we were saying about the cartoons from our childhood, where you recognise that these things aren't brilliant, but we watch them at a certain time that gives them a certain weight in our minds that they perhaps don't deserve of their own merits, but because we saw them when we did, and because we had the toys, and because we remember playing with them, that gives them a weight in our head that they like I said, they otherwise wouldn't have.
Yeah, it's because they were formative, isn't it? That's what it is.
And Star Wars is kind of the same, but for some reason, people have built it up to be something more than that.
Yeah, it's true.
And I don't think it takes anything away from it to point out its flaws.
Absolutely not.
Like it's developed this sort of like uncriticisable bubble around it, the original film.
It's totally true.
Yeah, it's really
I understand like why it was significant. I mean, those effects are amazing. Like the space opera stuff is great. It was the kind of thing that was never seen before, That panning shot at the beginning of the first film when you see the Star Destroyer come on from underneath is incredible. It's absolutely
a model that's been pulled over the camera on a fishing line. And
it's
brilliant.
It's so powerful, it's so influential, but ultimately, I mean, the flaws lie with things like the script and the storytelling and the characterization, because there isn't much. It's a very well-trodden mythological archetype. It's the hero's journey, which you'll find in any mythology you want to come across. Any kind of traditional mythology. Most of the dialogue is bad. Most of the acting isn't that great. It's just the way it is. But that doesn't mean that they're terrible or that you don't understand what their significance to cinema was or whatever, Do
you know what I find really interesting about what you're saying about the fandom with that, though, is that they did that Solo film, which I thought was good. I enjoyed that. I thought it was fun. It felt like the original Star Wars. But the reaction to it was really negative.
Yeah,
and I just kind of thought, I don't know what you want.
Maybe. I mean, revolutionary idea. Maybe this film series that was produced originally in like the late 1970s through to the early 1980s, maybe it's a product of its era, and maybe it's time to let it go.
Said that, but The Mandalorian's brilliant.
Yeah, it's true. But then again, what makes The Mandalorian brilliant is that it's kind of a different thing, isn't it? You know, it's its own creation. Which happens to be situated in the Star Wars universe. It's obviously a tangential story, which is the best way to tell a story in this universe, quite frankly, at this point. And it takes like the imagery and the core concepts of the story and then tells its own little narrative.
You were a fan of that one, weren't you, Rebbie?
Yeah, I liked that one. Very much to do with Grogu, to be fair. I enjoyed that one.
It is a good idea, though, if you've got this pre-established universe and you want to tell more stories in it. You don't have to pick up the main characters and carry on with them. You could
do some interesting stuff. I mean, and there's a lot to pick from it. Like Star Wars has cultivated this incredible extended universe where there are novels and there are comics and video games and all sorts of stuff which differ wildly from where the films have gone, and that could be fun to pick up maybe at some point.
They discounted it all though when Disney did their own. I understand why, because ultimately it's like, if we're going to draw upon the novels in terms of what happened next, which version do we go with?
Which one do you go for?
Different, so,
how do we reconcile all of this?
There's about 80 versions of what happened after the Death Star.
It's true.
So
I
get that. I get that, but
it's true.
You do feel like they could have done more with it. Just returning to Pixar stuff, and we talk about villains. So, like, talk about Palpatine there, where you're talking about like he was never the plan for that to come back. He really wasn't.
It's that so was clear.
Very much alive. But I like when you see something that's an example of the exact reverse of that, where something was set up right from the very beginning, and the payoff of it is so satisfying. Is the villain in Moana?
Oh yeah. It's
so clever, and you're like, it's seeded right from the very beginning, but you don't see it.
No.
And then when you get the revelation, you're like, oh, that's very clever. That's and that's the difference between a last-minute decision and something that's set up right from the beginning of your story.
Yeah. And like, as an incidental villain, can I just throw in a word for the crab?
Yes.
I love him.
Yeah.
I love him.
Name.
Tamatoa? His name is Tamatoa, I think. He is awesome. Yeah. I love him, and his song is an earworm. Shiny is a pain in the arse. You listen to it and you're like, all the way through the next couple of months, you just you find yourself humming it and singing bits of it. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I also found that with the You're Welcome song.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great, isn't it? Who'd have thought Dwayne Johnson can like actually sing pretty well?
He does a good job, doesn't he? But what makes Maui such an interesting character is that 20 years ago, he would have legitimately been seen as the hero in a Disney film. Whereas in this, he's very much framed of he's kind of a dick.
Kind of the villain, in many respects.
He's the hero, but he's not,
He's kind of negative, isn't he,
Yeah, he just goes about doing whatever the hell he wants, and everyone, look how great I am. Not thinking about the consequences of his actions. And everything bad that happens in them films is because of him.
Yeah, it's because of him. And it's such a beautiful film as well, isn't it? It's so gorgeous. It's such a lovely looking film. I also love the fact that it's drawing on genuine mythology for its story, I think that's awesome.
They've got there's no real villain.
Nope.
There's no romance in it.
No. That's a big thing, isn't it? Female protagonist, no tacked on romance option. She's not just like a functionary of the male characters.
No, and they don't even have the thing we've spoken about many times, which is the jokey little chatty animal thing. She's got a chicken, but it doesn't talk.
No.
It doesn't make pop culture references that are out of time with the rest of the film or anything like that.
You know? Yeah, I will say thank you for that. My God, because that is an archetype that needs to die.
Yeah, I know Rebecca's not a fan of the snowman in Frozen for that reason either, are you?
No. Right.
I can't believe they brought him back after they killed him.
Yeah.
It's just not necessary.
It's not.
He's very much a product of some boardroom meeting deciding that they need another one of these characters who's
That's
like...
exactly it. I mean, Frozen is full of that, actually. I mean, the original... have you ever looked into how Frozen was created?
I think so. I think it was a lot darker.
Originally, it was going to be an adaptation of the Snow Queen. Now, you know the story of the Snow Queen? It's a German folktale. It's really good, very dark, very, very cool. And in that version, Elsa was the villain. She was the Snow Queen. But you know what changed it? Why they had to change it? When the song came through.
Right.
They were listening to the song, and it was supposed to be the villain's song, and as someone said, this you cannot make this the villain's song. It doesn't work. It's too like empowering. It's too brilliant. So they rewrote the entire story around the song.
Right.
The entire story.
I do like the story of that film.
I do. I think it's a good film, and I like the fact that Elsa she kind of goes down the classic villain route in a way.
Yeah.
But pulls it back. She kind of pulls it back, and I like Elsa as a character. I don't like the fact that she kind of has to compromise herself, and sort of try to fit in and whatnot. I'm like, no, fuck that. Go for the palace of ice in the mountains, Fuck that.
Yeah.
My entire prejudice is, no, you look much better. You seem happier. You're much more powerful. Screw the villagers, let them freeze.
Yeah, I know what you mean. You kind of see where entirely where she's coming from.
Yeah.
Like, if the correct way to make these people comfortable is to hide the truth of who you are and everything, then that's not right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But like, what makes... So, the snowman is the very classic modern example of that.
Yeah.
Terrible character choice. But I did love the fact that Moana didn't have that, because I was really worried that they would. With the chicken, I thought that was going to end up being that, but it's not, and it's very sort of saved through that, and even the villain is like I said, the villain isn't a villain.
No, it's almost like a force of nature, almost, isn't it? It's, and
it's only the way it is because Maui steals his heart.
Exactly,
It's just basically. This thing is the source. It's like the earth goddess, if you like. She's like the source of all life in the world. When you rip the heart out of her, it basically inverses that.
Yeah.
So she starts becoming the source of everything that she's given life to now starts to decay and whatnot. So when they're saying that she is causing everything to die and decay and crops to turn to ash, she's not consciously, intentionally doing this. It's just happening because you've ripped the life out of her, and everything is tied into her. It's entirely Maui's fault. It's not, and then when they put that back, it immediately undoes it all. But the scene where she faces the goddess and walks across the sea towards her, brilliant. Yeah, absolutely breathtaking. The music, everything about it is just, and it's such a good end conflict.
Yep.
I'm just gonna walk slowly towards her and sing, and then it's so unlike the big battle that you expect.
Right, it's the inversion of the formula, isn't it? So there's no violence, there's no actual conflict, there's no fight. It's solved through other means, through understanding.
They did this with the ending of the most recent Wonder Woman film.
Oh, the 1984 is it called? Yeah, I haven't seen it. Yet.
It's not brilliant, but it has some really good elements, which actually showcases who Diana is meant to be as a character. And the villain is this guy who, this is a very quick sidebar as a fan of the comics. It annoys me that they use this villain because it's one of them where they use the name but nothing about him is who he is in the comics. So they could have just made up a new character, to be honest. But they use a guy, it's called Maxwell Lord, but if you've ever read the comics, it's not Maxwell Lord, it's nothing, So he is this businessman who comes from a very poor immigrant family, and he has a son, and he grew up in very poverty conditions, and it's the 1980s, and the American dream is the big thing.
So like it's Reaganism and
exactly.
so on and so forth.
He wants to give his son the best life he possibly can, so he never has to worry about poverty the way that he did. And he comes across this magical item that allows him to grant wishes for other people, but not himself.
Right. Okay.
But gains power through that, which he can then use for his own ends. And so he's getting people to make wishes which benefit him in one thing or another. And the more powerful he gets, the more he loses his grip on humanity. But he keeps reality keeps corrupting because of everything that the wishes that are being granted. And the end is like he's become this like godlike being and can't keep his grip on reality anymore, and he's destroying everything. And Diana arrives at him, and you think, this is it, we're going to have the big superhero showdown here. And she just talks to him about his son.
Wow.
And just reminds him of why he's doing this. And he just breaks down in tears and just gives the power up.
Wow. I mean,
people complained about it on Twitter, and I'm like, what is wrong with you?
Yeah.
Why don't you understand that this is who Wonder Woman is?
Yeah.
This is the point. She's not Superman. She's not going to fly in there and throw a truck at him. If she can stop this by talking to him, then that is exactly what Diana is going to do, because that's who she is as a character.
That's
brilliant that they did that.
That
it really
is. I mean, that is for a superhero film. You know, that is a marked like transgression almost, isn't it? You know, I can see that being quite shocking.
People didn't like it, but I thought it was brilliant. I thought that was a really great.
But isn't that always the way? I mean, there is often like this reactionary quality, particularly to like people who are invested in particular franchises when they're expecting a particular thing, and they don't always tend to understand that, look, by giving you what's unexpected, that's not what you necessarily want, you are being respected. You know, the creators are saying to you, look, we believe you're sophisticated, imaginative beings, and that you can handle being given something different, that you can process this. So don't throw that back in their face, you know?
It's the exact opposite of what Rebecca was saying about Walking Dead, isn't it?
Yeah.
Really?
Pretty much. Yeah. It's not pandering. That's what it is. It's not treating your audience like children. I mean, I know I react really badly to media that treats me like a fool.
Yeah.
You know, like really badly. To like stories that only exist because the characters in it are the stupidest people on earth.
Or they're written to be stupid just to make that plot point work.
The Prometheus disease, basically.
Yes, everyone's stupid because they need to be to make these things happen.
Exactly. Where it's convenient writing, essentially.
Yeah.
Hate it. Yeah. Hate it.
Yeah.
Give me something that's like genuinely complex, that genuinely like grapples with what people are like, you know, or even like what fictional characters are like, rather than that.
Yeah, I also think there's a fear with a lot of people now in the writing that they do, in that they kind of feel like you have to like the main character.
Oh, I hate
and I think
that.
the best things are written. The best example for this recently done well, where it's so engaging, but the main character is not likable at all, was Fleabag.
Oh my god, yeah. That's a brilliant example. Fleabag was awesome.
Because that is in no way a likable character.
No.
She's a horrendously selfish, narcissistic human being.
Mm-hmm.
But that series is so engaging, and you care about... Yeah. It's amazing, because as a human, and you think, imagine being friends with her, and you think, God, no.
Yeah.
But you still kind of want things to work out for her, because you've been following her journey up to that point, and... You know, but she's not in any way likable as a character.
It's written sufficiently well, though, that you understand that, like, the flaws become relatable in a way, you know. And I loved it. I loved it so much. I like the fact that the show wasn't afraid to really go to places.
Have you watched it, Rebecca?
No.
It's on the iPlayer. I think you would like it. It's only like 12 episodes. Like most British sitcoms, it doesn't go on that long, so you can binge the whole thing in a day if you wanted to.
I did.
There's like 12 half-an-hour episodes, and that's it. But it's just a comedy about this woman whose life has kind of fallen apart because of something she did.
Yeah.
And it's kind of hinted at what she did, but then you find out at the end of the first season. but she's not a likable character. She's not kind. She's not super special. It's not part of this like, oh, she's a woman, so she has to be wonderful. It kind of goes very much against that.
Very much.
Very much an intentional decision from Phoebe Waller-Bridge, who's very much a feminist, but she's very much a feminist in the zone that feminism doesn't mean all women are superheroes.
Yeah.
It means that women can be portrayed with as much nuance as male characters. And that means that some of them are dickheads.
Yeah, I think it was a very conscious decision, wasn't it? I think, I think that's exactly what she's trying to say with the character, to be honest. It's like, look, there is this like puritanism when it comes to the portrayal of female characters, and it's anti-feminist. It's almost it's like
kind, they have to be brilliant. They have to be, if the husband is a dumb, fat, lazy guy in the family, the woman has to be smart and folding her arms and sighing because she's the one with the shit together. And it's because of course she has to be, because you can't possibly have an incompetent idiot who's a woman,
right? It disrespects, that's not feminism. It's it disregards and disrespects women who are real, who have problems and issues and like things going on in their lives, and that's what the Fleabag character is. She is a massively flawed, very, very realistic woman. I mean, what she evoked for me. I've got a really good friend who has bipolar, and when I was watching it, I was like, oh my god, that's it. That's what she is. She is like she has that condition.
Yeah, she veers from one extreme of emotion to the other and her actions to when she's in those zones.
And I related to her in many respects because she is like this. She's about our age. She's like a millennial, isn't she? She's like like an early millennial, and she expresses all of the ennui, all of the disappointment and disaffection with culture and with society and its prescriptions. She doesn't know where she is or who she is or what she wants, and is as a result massively broken. And it's brilliant. It is funny. It's really funny, actually.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's very funny.
But it's also very melancholy, and there are lots of like tensions in it. It's brilliantly written. I mean, it is just that it's just a tour de force in terms of its writing.
You should watch it, Rebecca. I think you'd like it. It's. I'm sure it's on BBC iPlayer.
I think that's where I saw it, to be honest.
I'll have a look into it.
I like something I like about British sitcoms is that you can usually devour them pretty quick. It's not like when someone tells you, "Oh, did you ever watch Cheers?" and you think, "No, I didn't, but I'll watch it." And then there's like 15 seasons, 20.
Yeah.
And you're like, God, this is going to be a time thing. The beautiful thing about if someone tells you to watch Blackadder or something is that 2 days and you've done it.
Yeah.
So you can do these things pretty quickly if you choose to for British sitcoms.
And like Fleabag does have a very definite story arc. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I like that about British sitcoms. How they don't. I mean, some of them do, but as a general rule, they don't outstay the welcome.
Yeah, it's true.
They generally come do what they need to do, and then they're gone.
And then skedaddle. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I think we pretty much drained that one dry. Unless is there anything else that you guys want to add?
Don't bother with any of the Cars films because they're pointless.
Yeah, I would say that too. Pixar don't bish very often, but the Cars films,
like an easy cash cow for kids. That one,
right?
There's nothing to them really. They just seem like they're from the wrong era to be made by Pixar.
They don't feel like Pixar films. They haven't got any of like the weight to them that Pixar films have.
No, it's very odd. Very odd.
The fact that they also feature in a very, very limited role, professional man-child Jeremy Clarkson does not help. Not me, it doesn't.
They just feel like the thing that the studio's putting out to finance the next creative project.
Does feel like that, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, we want to make another Up or Inside Out, but we'll put one of these out because they're easy to make.
Yeah.
We've got all the characters already animated. Loads of kids will go and see it and buy the toys.
The
money to finance the next Inside Out,
I just don't get
it feels like one of them.
I don't get the world of Cars. It doesn't because you've got cars acting like as cars do in races and on roads, but then you've got cars acting as people in a civilization. It doesn't gel for me.
You get that in classic Disney though. Like there's a famous Christmas episode where you see Donald Duck and his family carving a turkey. And you're like, hang on, whoa.
Yeah.
What's the rules here? What's going on here? And why is Goofy like it walks about in clothes and that, but then Pluto's a dog?
Yeah. It's a fair point. It's an absolutely fair point. I like classic Disney cartoons though. You know, like the bit part ones, which are
I love them.
The Merry Melodies and whatnot. I think they're great. I think they're
They
so
put a load
odd.
of them on Disney Plus. I think there's a few of them on Disney Plus,
with some very notable exceptions, I imagine, for the fairly obvious racism and whatnot.
Yeah, they have put warnings on some stuff.
Yeah, I imagine they have.
In a different time and stuff, which is fair enough. But I think some of them are so bad that's not even.
Some of them are. Some of them you're just like, wow. Yeah. There's a Three Little Pigs adaptation that Disney did, which is good. It's actually a decent cartoon, but there's a point in it where the wolf is at the door and is pretending to be a salesman, and it's like this really offensive Jewish stereotype, really offensive. It's like, wow.
A better version of that isn't racist was amazingly. I saw a very funny take on that on Peppa Pig. This was years ago when my niece was really young and I was babysitting, and they had whatever channel that was on. It'll be CBeebies or whatever. Mm-hmm. And there's the pig family. I don't know any names except Peppa, the obvious one.
I do know that the kid is called George, but that's
right. and the neighbour comes around who's a wolf.
Okay.
And he's sort of like walking around the house looking at the house. And he says to Dad Pig, he's like, this is a nice looking house you've got here. What's it made out of? And he doesn't even finish the sentence, and the dad goes, bricks.
That's kind of cool.
That's comedy gold, that. By any measure, that's funny.
That's pretty good, actually, for like a Peppa Pig episode. That's pretty good, isn't it? You know? That's high comedy,
parents, that. Yeah, it is. That's high concept, that.
Did you guys, hear recently, there was an article doing the rounds that because Peppa Pig is such a phenomenon in the US, there's, generations of kids, young kids over there are starting to develop British accents.
Really? That's interesting.
So
I wonder
cool.
If that happened with any other sort of, like Thomas the Tank Engine and stuff that went over in the past. I wonder if that had any sort of.
I don't know, because I don't know whether back then they wouldn't have dubbed it. I know they did that a lot in the 80s and the 90s.
Fair point. Yeah.
But it's not so much now. Now they just tend to let it go. So I don't know, but I just think it's really interesting.
That is funny.
It's really interesting.
Kids talking with British accent and stuff like that.
Because of Peppa Pig, as long as they don't start oinking as well.
But it happens a lot. I mean, there's so many people from sort of Asian countries who speak British with an American accent because they're friends.
Yeah, it's true. It's absolutely true.
It's quite a common phenomenon.
The other thing is that other countries teach English using American videos for some reason.
Right.
Yeah.
So they end up speaking American English as opposed to one of the other many permutations of the language.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very, very, very much, guys. I get the impression there's still a lot more we could talk about here. This could go on forever. Maybe a part 2 at some point?
Yeah.
If you'd be up for that?
Yeah.
There's plenty more Pixar films to go through.
There's a lot of stuff to talk about here, I think. Before we go, is there anything you guys would like to pimp out?
Do you want to go first, Rebecca?
Actually, this is kind of going back in time a little bit instead of forward, but I've recently done an event for autism awareness, because obviously this month is Autism Awareness and Acceptance Month. So if anybody wants to go backwards on my blog a little bit, there's actually a full week of stuff, of books and articles and things like that to do with it.
Brilliant. There'll be a link below, ladies and gents.
Yeah, and I suppose just for me, just the usual, my most recent book is called Whistling Past the Graveyard. It's available in paperback and ebook if you want to get that off Amazon or any of the usual book places.
And once again, guys, there will be links to absolutely everything below. I tend to also put links to all your other books as well.
Thank you.
It's just the way I do it, As for myself, guys, same as usual, you can find me knocking about here on Exaggerated Elegy. Links to all of my published fiction at strangeplaygrounds.com. Born in Blood Volume 2 is coming this summer from Perpetual Motion Machine Publications, which I'm really, really, really happy about. And you can also come and chat to me over at Enigmatic Elegy on Twitter if you fancy it. With that said, thank you so much for listening, and thank you guys for chatting to me this evening. It's been great fun. Really, really appreciated. Bye-bye, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.